I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, September 13th, 2021, and the time is 7:06 p.m. We are present this evening in our school board meeting room located at Northfield Public Schools District offices. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Before proceeding with the meeting, I want to welcome those in the audience who are here to observe the board doing our important work on behalf of our students. We appreciate the time you took to be here this evening. I would like to remind those present that on August 9th, 2021, the board adopted a resolution that requires all people over the age of 2 to wear a face covering that fully covers the nose and mouth at all times while inside a Northfield District facility, including during school board meetings. This decision was based on the guidance of the CDC, the Mayo Clinic, the Minnesota Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Education, public health, and medical experts. I see that we have some here who are present who are not wearing a mask. We now respectfully ask that you put on a mask. If you need one, we have them available for you at the back of the room. We will pause now and wait to proceed with the meeting until everyone is wearing a mask face covering that fully covers their nose and mouth. So again, just to reiterate, the guideline does require that the face covering fully covers the nose and mouth. I can't see behind the pillars, so if there's a board member who could let me know if there's anyone who is not masked. Okay, again, just want to reiterate that the face covering must fully cover the nose and mouth. Okay. It appears we are in compliance. Okay. I understand there is someone that I am not able to see, however, is not fully covering their nose and mouth. Okay, thank you. So it appears at this point, thank you for compliance with this requirement. I will, however, remind anyone who does forget that as a reminder that the face mask must fully cover the nose and mouth at all times throughout the meeting. So thank you for that. We'll move on to our meeting agenda. Dr. Hillman, there were a number of items in the table file.
Yes, in this evening's table file, we had an update for the superintendent operations and COVID-19 update. It includes the latest COVID-19 cases from Rice County Public Health. We have a gift agreement, and we have several personnel items, including appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment. You'll see there's a lot of those tonight. It's the beginning of the school year. We have some leaves of absences and some resignations.
Okay, thank you. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Corey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on now to public comment. This is an opportunity for residents, business and property owners, parents, students, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, and administrators. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific individual or to a specific matter, this input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. You will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with these guidelines. Please address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the board chair, identify yourself, and if you represent a group, we require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. The board has allocated up to a total of 30 minutes for public comment at regular school board meetings. With that said, it is 7:10, so we will conclude public comment on or around 7:40 p.m. this evening. I will now begin to call those up who have signed to speak up, to speak in the order in which they signed in. Vice Chair Gorwitz will be monitoring the speaker's time. She will signal each speaker with the time they have remaining at 1 minute, 30-second and 10-second intervals. Again, please make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. So with that, I will call the first person. We welcome Lindsay Brisky. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I took note at the last meeting that every single doctor that spoke expressed that they would not bore you with their data. I've done my research and I personally believe that data is very valuable. So with that said, the CDC states that the infection fatality rate remains the same in pediatric cases post-Delta as it was pre-Delta. The Delta variant is not more dangerous to children. In fact, statistics show that if you are under the age of 18, you are at less risk of hospitalization than if you are 40 and vaccinated. I've taken notice that the language from you, Dr. Hillman, states that masking requirements will remain in place for longer for students who are not yet eligible for vaccines. I'd like to make myself clear, vaccinations are not the way out of this pandemic for all families. I'm asking that the members of this board familiarize yourself with the VAERS database, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. The VAERS reports that 14,506 deaths, 59,000 hospitalizations, and 18,000 are permanently disabled from the COVID vaccine. These are only the reported cases. Historically, only 10% of adverse reactions are reported, so we can safely assume that these numbers are only a glimpse into the harm caused. I have been following a study evaluated from this VAERS database and found that vaccinated children aged 12 to 17 who have received both doses are suffering some cardiac damage, actually. In fact, their chances of having cardiac-related adverse events are 3.7 to 6.1 times higher than their 120-day COVID hospitalization rates. That's pretty serious. Despite these adverse effects being troubling to me, if vaccination is the right choice for you, I truly respect that. I do. Science shows us that if you are vaccinated, you have a 1 in 100,000 chance of being hospitalized. That's fantastic. For the vaccinated, this pandemic is over. Likewise, for the unvaccinated, this pandemic is just as much over. It is nobody else's job to protect those who choose not to protect themselves, any more than it's your job to drive around with a mattress strapped to the front of your car because somebody else chooses not to wear a seatbelt. You wear your own seatbelt. It's been a year and a half and there's still no end game here. My research shows me that the district is allocated over $13,000 per student. It was said at a previous meeting that greater than 500 signatures collected on the petition to allow the parents the choice to mask was a small voice. Does the $6,600,000 allocated per these 500 voices matter? Is that a voice to anybody? How will this enrollment deficit affect the families who opt to remain in the district in hopes that our voices will be heard? By denying parents the right to make the decision to best for their child, the school board is choosing to send large sums of funding to the districts who do respect voices in their communities. I've been in contact with Dr. Hillman, who I will say was very prompt in his response. Sorry, stumbling. I was informed that we would have more information next week as to how many families have chosen to take their children elsewhere. So with that, I would like to leave you with a quote from our president, Joe Biden. What more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see? We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost us all, so please do the right thing.
Thank you, Lindsay. Next, Rachel Trinka. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. My name is Rachel Trinka. I am with kind of a new group, Our Children, Our Choice. Wow, I thought after a month I could really be prepared and talk, but I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a politician, and I am not going to be any of those. And I'm sad that I have to look and research and do all this stuff for my own kids. I'm born and raised here in Northfield. I graduated in wow, this is a lot more than I thought. I graduated in 2002, and I never thought I'd be so disappointed and not trust the school district. Um, the, there's no consistency, you guys. There's no consistency. You can go to school and have to wear a mask, but at 3:30, you can go to a volleyball game. I get that it's for in-person learning, but that doesn't make any difference. It's not COVID. 9th grade band. They had to go around and identify themselves and take a survey so they can choose what they call themselves, but yet they can't take their mask off. No visitors at Greenville. At this time, we are not able to accommodate visitors for lunch due to safety protocols and logistics. Drop-in or unscheduled meetings may not be possible at this time. Yet 4 reps can go there on the first day of school and eat lunch with our kids, and we can't. Which, by the way, if my son or daughter is wearing a mask underneath their chin while they're eating their food and spitting and then putting that mask back on, that's disgusting. I've got lots of papers. This is actually not that much. Oh yeah. Vaccine clinic, FDA, right on their website. You held a vaccine clinic at the Northfield High School, ages 14 to 18. I'll just quickly, whatever, if anybody wants to see this, I'll hand it out. The observed risk for myocarditis and pericarditis. The observed risk is highest in males 12 through 17 years of age. Available data from short-term follow-up suggests that most individuals have had resolution of symptoms. However, some individuals required intensive care support. Information is not yet available about potential long-term health outcomes. The Comirnaty prescribing information includes a warning about these risks. That was what you guys held. So thank you for your time. Matt and Julie, Tabitha, look forward to meeting with you guys on Friday. There's a lot more things to discuss, but thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Rachel. Our next speaker is Kevin Allen. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, school board, for the opportunity to speak. I am Kevin Allen and reside in Northfield. My wife is a teacher in the district, so I know better than to speak for her. Our 2 children graduated a few years ago. I fully support the policy that to reduce spread of COVID-19, masks must generally be worn while in Northfield public school buildings and buses, with some exemptions, alternatives, and temporary exceptions as written in the policy. COVID-19, and especially the Delta variant, is a clear and present danger to students and staff, and steps are essential to protect life, health, and the mission of the schools. In-person education in class groups is the most effective and comprehensive approach for most learners and providers. Sick children can't be there to learn. Sick teachers can't be there to teach. Masks, when worn correctly, are our most effective tool for managing the pandemic. They are necessary protective equipment for the enterprise of public education. I'm an engineer and a practical guy, but I recently started volunteering at a Habitat for Humanity house build and wear safety glasses, earplugs, and a hard hat when required. Some tasks require a mask as well. These items are as important as the other tools we use. The hard hat has already saved me a few bumps on the head. Vaccinations are another important tool, but not sufficient until more students are eligible and more eligible people get the vaccine. At some point, vaccination against COVID-19 should also be added to the list of required vaccinations for students to attend public schools. And it should be required for all staff. I don't understand why this is even controversial. These are simple things we can do to provide the best chance for the best educational outcome. Thank you for establishing the mask policy. It provides our best way forward.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker is Randolph Reister, Dr. Randolph Reister. Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I come to you as a father of two in the Northfield School District. I also come to you as an internal medicine physician with 18 years of experience, where my only goals have been to care for the sick, prevent disease, and treat disease. I also come to you as someone who's had COVID-19 in November prior to the vaccination. And I can honestly say I was the sickest I've ever been in my whole life. I've been in very tough situations as a physician in my career, and it's been a wonderful career. But I've never faced anything like the COVID outbreak that we're facing now. I work in the emergency room and the med-surg unit. I am faced with critically ill people every day when I go there, and critically ill patients that have COVID-19. And anything that we can do to prevent the spread of disease as part of a robust public health policy, I commend. So I commend the Northfield School District and the people seated here today for their previous work, and I support the policy moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reister. We welcome as our next speaker, Martha Meyer. Welcome, Martha.
Hello. Thank you so much. My name is Martha Meyer. I am a townie. I'm an alumni of Northfield School District, and I now work in the district. And I want to thank you all for the work that you've done to help us start this school year safely. I am very proud that this school district and our administrative leadership especially have prioritized student and staff safety with the COVID-19 safety recommendations. I personally have observed our students both understand and implement these protocols without muss or fuss. They're washing their hands, they're wearing their masks unless they are exempt from that requirement, and they're enjoying a lot of time outside with their classmates. I am really proud of our students, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to offer them stable in-person learning experiences throughout this year. On a personal note, and as a community member and someone who's working in the schools, I am very grateful for these protocols. I have elderly grandparents who are in and out of the hospitals a lot these days. I have vulnerable family members who, if they got COVID, it would be a very big deal. And I have children I work with outside of the schools who I'm very concerned about their safety and their health. Were the district not taking these protocols, I don't know that I could justify putting my loved ones at risk. I often ask my students if they can tell that I'm smiling under my mask, and I'm happy to say most of the time they can. And I hope that you can also tell that I'm smiling at you through my mask. So thank you very much for all the hard work you've done over the last month and many other years of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Our next speaker, Matt Roan. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. My name is Matt Roan, and I live a few blocks from here and am part of Isaiah, a faith-based group concerned about the well-being of our most vulnerable. I want to thank the school board for adopting such good COVID mitigation policies. Please don't waver on them. My daughter, a product of Northfield Schools, started her teaching career last year at the Red Wing Middle and High School. She and other young faculty find constant changes in modes of teaching because of hybrid teaching and quarantines exhausting and bad for good teaching, as do many of our better older teachers. School boards that don't support sound COVID health measures like Northfield are helping to lead to environments where good young and older teachers are dropping out of the profession at increasing rates. We need good measures like those the school board has adopted to keep kids, staff, and teachers in our schools as much as feasible this year and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Sandra Turbis. Welcome, Sandra.
Hi, thank you. I am also a parent of a ninth grader in the district, and so this is important to me as well as to all of you, both for my own family's sake and for the sake of our community. And I just want to mainly again thank all of you for the hard work and the hard decisions, balancing all of the different elements that you've had to consider in this and everything else that you do. I know you have other work to get onto tonight and always, and just want you to know that I appreciate that. And I would just I want to thank you for prioritizing in-person learning for our kids by having the current COVID protocols, because that really is the way to do it, as with a measure of safety and protection. Like 13 of the 15 largest metro districts, we've kind of led the way in Northfield to making it safe and doing the best thing for our kids. They need to be in school. Most of them need to be in school in person for their mental health and otherwise. And as a physician, I'm seeing this in a lot of different ways too, like Dr. Reister, but I work in the nursing home. So I've had lots of people pass away. I've had their kids and their grandkids affected, even if their kids themselves aren't very at risk of COVID. So that is important to me in a lot of generations. A colleague of mine is a nurse practitioner, and she can't go into our nursing homes right now to take care of our patients because one of her kids goes to a school that masks and one of her kids goes to a school that doesn't. And the child from the school that doesn't mask came home the very first day with COVID, and his whole classroom and grade is shut down. Now it's a small school, so there's only one classroom for his grade. And so, and then the sister has it too, and the husband, my colleague, does not, but she has to be home to take care of all of them. So the ripple effects obviously are significant. And lastly, I just want to say I'm also thankful for my own public school education, where I learned, the complexities of science and germs and math. And I learned things like small percentages can still be important and significant, like 0.03% of pediatric cases resulting in death. That's very small. However, when we're talking about 5.3 million cases, that's still almost 500 children who have died from COVID. And to me, that's not insignificant. And that's not just math. There's math, and then there's more than math. So I'm, again, thankful for all that you do, thankful for the public schools, and continue with all your good work. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Turbis. Next, we welcome Jane Runsheimer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Jane Runsheimer, one of the family physicians at the Alina Clinic in Northfield. I spoke briefly at the last meeting in support of the mask mandate for our students and staff. The statistics that I brought forth included the pediatric mortalities from COVID-19 and the evidence that masks do prevent the spread of disease. Today, I want to emphasize the importance of keeping our kids in school. Distance learning has been difficult for many students, both with regard to academic success and mental health. My colleagues and I have seen a significant increase in pediatric visits for anxiety, depression, and school failure in the past year due to the isolation, sleep disruption, and disengagement from school and family. In our mental health clinic at Alina, we are over 2 months out for an ADD evaluation or a counseling appointment for a young person or an adult. One of our counselors actually stopped doing ADD evaluations as a part of his practice because he was so overwhelmed by the need. Rates of suicidal ideation and attempts among children and adolescents across the United States have increased during this time, as has substance abuse. So keeping our kids in school is critical to their mental and emotional health. Again, masking and promoting immunizations make that possible, but so does keeping our teachers and our staff healthy, which is my other concern. We need to continue to protect our school district staff, some of whom are my patients. If we lose our staff due to COVID-19 or due to job resignations from fear of illness, our schools will not be able to stay in session, especially since there are currently no substitute teachers. This is a very real concern. As of September 10th, 2021, at least 1,065 educators and school personnel have died from COVID-19. Last month, that is August 2021, with the outbreak of COVID-19 in the Miami-Dade County schools, 13 teachers died of COVID-19. That's 13 teachers in one district in 1 month. Right now, we need to continue masking and promoting vaccinations. I went and visited one of my patients with a brain tumor at Northfield Hospital this morning. Earlier this summer, the hospital was able to close their COVID-19 wing on the medical floor. Now the wing is open, and this morning, according to the charge nurse, completely full. I watched down the opposite hall as my colleagues, probably Randy actually, put on a respirator, a gown, gloves, and a shield, and got ready to go in and examine a patient. The hospital is full due to COVID patients and patients we cannot transfer to higher levels of care because there are no beds in the Twin Cities or in Rochester. Unfortunately, the pandemic is not over. Over 1,000 educators have died. Over 3,600 healthcare workers have died. We are tired. We are tired of fighting when there are simple things we can do to help end this pandemic. Thank you for your courage to continue to keep our schools as safe as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Rensheimer. Next is Leota Goodney. Welcome, Leota.
Hello, I'm Leota Goodney, and I am a taxpayer and resident, longtime resident of Northfield. My children went through the public schools. I'm here to speak for the community because I live with a family who is immunocompromised. And I am so thankful that the school board has that the school district has a robust masking policy, and because I feel like it is helpful to the whole community when there is not a pool of people who are getting together closely every day for what needs to be done. So that is one reason that I'm glad to have this. Another reason is that one of my children has a two-parent household. Both of them are working, and my granddaughter is in second grade this year, and last year was just horrible. They live in a very small apartment, and both parents were working at home, and they were trying to homeschool this child as well through the Zoom. I mean, it was through the school district, but it was, they were having to essentially be the stand-in in that situation with a first grader. So in-person schooling is necessary not only for the children, which it vitally is necessary, but it is also vitally important for working parents. So I thank you so much for that. And I did read, as other people have mentioned, I did read in the Northfield News that the Northfield School District is short-staffed. So you cannot afford to have ill teachers because it is going to be disastrous. So thank you very much for your strong policy, and I encourage you to keep it up.
Thank you, Leota. Our last speaker this evening is Dr. Felicity Enders. Welcome, Dr. Enders.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Felicity Enders. I spoke last time about the Delta pandemic, the new variant from COVID. I'm here today as the parent of two kids who have been in school in person for 3 days for the first time in a year and a half. They are so excited. I'm here to thank you for your leadership. You've been doing a phenomenal job in extremely challenging circumstances. I particularly want to thank the teachers and all the staff who are in person. That's particularly because we've had a wave of retirements. Totally understandable, right? And yet that meant you had to bring in new teachers. I've been very impressed with the people who have stepped up with a commitment to learning for our children. They've been flexible, they're taking care of our kids and doing a wonderful job. I also want to speak to the Portage program. Both my kids were in the Portage program last year. I don't want to oversell this. Portage was really hard on our family, right? I thought I was going nuts, but my kids learned. I didn't know that they were, but they did. They're still at grade level, they're doing great. And that gave me a new perspective on that program. And I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank the people who were reaching out through Portage to bridge the kids back into school. There are people who are making one-on-one connections with the students. That made it so much easier for our students to come back. And the technology folks, I admit that I was really concerned last year. There has been a major rethinking of communication and connection. It's going so much better. Thank you. I also want to thank all of you, right? You are leading us in a time of change, really tough, and you're giving thoughtful consideration to all the views. There's a lot of views in this room. There's also a lot of views from people who cannot be here. None of the kids get to speak at this podium, but you are thinking on their behalf and doing what's best for our community. The Delta variant will not be our last variant. The way any organism works is by continuing to evolve. The new variants that are helpful, meaning they don't hurt us, they make things better for us, those aren't going to get names or Greek letters. We won't ever hear about them. But we're going to have to keep learning about how to live in this situation as things evolve. And hopefully we will come through it and not have to deal with all these masks at some point in the future. But I want to thank you for continuing to be flexible. None of us know what's going to happen, but you are leading us in a time of change, and I want to thank you for serving.
Dr. Enders. That does conclude the public comment portion of our meeting. The board wants to thank you for everyone who spoke tonight, and especially in the respectful way in which you spoke. The board appreciates the time you took to share your perspective. We understand there may be some who wanted to speak tonight, and may have other things they would like to share with the board. So you can share your comments to the board via email at board@northfieldschools.org. So thank you again. We can move on now to items for discussion and report. No, I'm sorry. We need to do announcements.
Correct.
And recognition. So we'll move on to announcements and recognition. Dr. Hillman?
I just have one announcement this evening, and I just wanted to share with the board and the folks here and the folks watching at home. Last Friday, we sent out to families that we are starting a strategic planning process, and that strategic planning process will help create a set of guidelines or a vision, if you will, and some strategic outcomes that's going to guide the district decision-making over the next 5 years. And we really are interested in having people's feedback about what are the outcomes that you expect for the district to pursue over the next 5 years. And we're going to offer, we have 4 different sessions that are planned. The first one on September 22nd, because we would like to have people be able to engage outside so that they're comfortable. We're actually going to do one in the district office parking lot here to see if we can, we'll try to pull that off. We've not tried that before, but we're going to give it a shot so that we can be outside. And so that we do not need to require face coverings for that particular meeting. September 30th, 6 to 8 p.m. in the district office gymnasium. That's right upstairs. We'll also, that one face coverings will be required. We're also going to offer one via Zoom for people who aren't comfortable with either of those. That's on October 4th. We'll post that link in a future communication. And then on October 14th, during the Greenville Park Community School programming in the evening, we are going to offer one session inside, and that session will be entirely conducted in Spanish, where we'll have a translator who will be working with me to get feedback from our Spanish-speaking population. So those 4 sessions over the next month or 6 weeks. So we invite board members, if you want to attend those, you're more than welcome to. And we really encourage people from the public, whether you have kids in school or not. We want to hear from all of the people within our community. And again, we're really focused on what are the outcomes that the community would like to see the school district achieve over the next 5 years. So we look forward to seeing people, and hopefully we've provided a different kind of meeting for everyone's level of comfort.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Do board members have anything to add to announcements and recognitions? Okay, we can move on now to discussion and report. Our first report is instructional services, and that presentation is going to be done by Director of Instructional Services, Hope Langsted, and she is also here with a team of science specialists from the district. So welcome, Hope.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to be back in person. All right.
And board members, we're trying a little bit. We're going to actually have our presenters plug in at the podium this evening. So if you can have some patience as we make sure that's all working properly.
we go. Okay. So really happy to be here tonight with all of you in person. And this is one of two presentations that the Instructional Services Department typically gives in the fall. This one is less data heavy. And then in November, we'll be talking about the world's best workforce. So then you're going to hear the data that we have compiled from the 2021 school year. So tonight, we're going to bring you a department overview. And just as a reminder, the mission of our department to strive for excellence in teaching and learning. We're committed to maximizing student outcomes within a system of continuous improvement. We hold true to that, despite the first year of disrupted instructional services work, where our team was really doing some other duties that we needed to support the district during that pandemic year. So I was super happy to hear about the Portage comments because we all worked really hard with that. So we are excited to get back to this work this year. So these are the critical areas in which we support the district. I'm not going to go through them all. You have them, but as you can see, it's quite comprehensive. And we work in collaboration with the buildings and with a lot of teams to support all of the teaching and learning and PD that goes on in the district. There are a couple great things that happened last year. Matt Bergwell's here from the EL department. One big thing that happened was that we were able to go through the EL planning process and update our EL plan for the district. And that was a collaborative effort with the regional centers for excellence. So we are really happy about that task being done. And then I just wanted to highlight the summer work teams. This was a real bright spot for us in that the elementary principals pooled together their remaining PD funds so that we could bring together over 70 teachers from the district to work on plans for the 21-22 school year. And you can see they covered a variety of areas, and it was just some really good work done and it's ongoing to help us transition to a new year and how we might look differently at serving kids' needs. So that was a great thing. And a shout out to everybody who served on those teams, everybody who was on a team, applied to be on that team, understood what the goal and the deliverables were for that particular team. And the work done was just outstanding. So where we're headed is a revisit of the Northfield Schools content and instructional review cycle. So this was rolled out to staff. I'm just gonna show that tonight. And that really is beginning the process of looking at each content area with specific tasks in each phase of the review cycle. So we are excited actually on Wednesday to start with the middle school science team. And then this year CTE and PE and health content areas will also be part of the process for program review. And it is important to note that the standards adoption cycle has been delayed by MDE. So we are sort of adjusting to that. We know that there may be other changes ahead, but we're gonna roll with it and keep on going. The feedback to this cycle was quite positive, and we are excited to begin that work and work with teams from each content area. Aligned with that, shout out to Val, is a 10-year budget plan that we are working on to align our resource allocation with that content and instructional review cycle. Our goal is to be fully transparent about the resources we have and the resources and the resource allocation. So the two walk hand in hand, and we want everybody involved in the process to be aware of how those two pieces work together. And now, the best part of the night. You know, last year was a challenge, right? It was a challenge for everybody in this room. So it is really, really nice to bring you a bright spot for last year. One of the biggest changes we made, come on up, was the addition of a science specialist position at each elementary school. And so they launched their program in the middle of a pandemic. And I thought that this was just an incredible story to share. So tonight I bring you Kelly Johnson, Tanya Will, and Dusty Pina, and they're going to share their story.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to basically talk about what elementary science has been up to this past year. It has really been an interesting road. During the summer of 2020, we had the charge of reviewing the next generation standards, selecting curriculum, creating an implementation plan, and presenting that plan to administration to go further. In doing so, that was a lot to bite off. That was an accelerated process. This was in response to a change in how science was being delivered. Throughout the years, the science itself had been squished out a little bit by other subject areas, and now science was to be a specialist area. During the 2020-21 school year, we delivered science instruction to every student. We implemented our year 1 modules, and then we structured the students in this implementation year into grade bands of kindergarten and first grade, second and third grade, and fourth and fifth grade. We're excited this year as we continue to deliver science instruction to every student. This summer, we reviewed and reflected on year 1 implementation. We secured the materials that we needed and equipment in order to have students involved in science. And then we selected the critical pathways for the year 2 modules and formatted those lessons. We continued to structure this year in grade bands of K1 together, 2, 3, and 4, 5. During this process, we selected FOSS as our curriculum. It's a full option science system. And it was the reason we selected this particular resource is it was designed to give opportunities for students to think scientifically and have multisensory activities and students engaged in science on a regular basis, regardless of their prior knowledge, language, or background. It also went very nicely with our with the next generation standards because they promoted 3-dimensional learning, where we focused on science and engineering practices, disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. One of the things I'd like to mention is that the active investigation is really what was at the heart of all that we did. It's built around kids doing science. They did firsthand investigation of phenomena. They used classroom tested pedagogies and practices to build the students' understanding of disciplinary core ideas in science. We used FOSS's recommendations for Minnesota in order to decide on the modules that we would go forward with. So when I referred to year 1 modules and year 2 modules, because we were doing an accelerated implementation, we banded the topics together to be able to go through the implementation process. Last year, we did the first grade, third grade, and fifth grade topics, and this year we're doing the kindergarten, second, and fourth. One of the things that was interesting for us to wrestle with was taking FOSS's curriculum and meshing it with the specialist format. That was something that really took some energy to figure out how this would work. So we have 50 to 60 minutes of science class each week with a class of students. We knew that we needed active investigations around those grade band topics. And then we knew we wanted to have authentic materials and equipment that the kids were going to be engaging with. And one piece of the FOSS program and other just good science practices is using a science notebook to collect and record their data. Now, together we decided that our focus in the first year was really going to be to build this community of learners who together we're going to go through and be doing and practicing the scientific and engineering practices. And so the 4 statements here that they're going to explore and develop questions around phenomena, investigate and gather data from experiments, and communicate understanding through models and evidence, and design and build solutions to problems was what we were hoping for all of our students. Now, we know that last year was not a year that we had people in the building, but we were so excited with the work the students were doing with the authentic materials that we're going to just click through some photos of kids engaging in these different activities. So we have the Earth and Space science, which was 1/3 of the year, where the topics were pebbles, sand and silt, water and climate, and earth and sun. You can see students that would get challenges, science challenges, to sort out different sizes of materials. And they needed to come up with their method for doing so. The thinking that went behind some of this for kids that were very small was pretty amazing. Building models of the earth and the sun and the moon as they talked about the rotation and which way things were going and how this affected seasons. The conversation that goes with it was pretty amazing. There are also times when kids needed to discover things like which kinds of surfaces could absorb water and which would repel water, and how water might change things if you looked up close. We used actual equipment like balances to try to figure out how to measure different kinds of things, and then had different challenges to see if you could make certain things happen if you tried something. Very rarely did we give a prescribed recipe for doing something. The thinking was more on the student. As we moved into physical science, the modules we worked with were sound and light, motion and matter, and mixtures and solutions. Students had challenges of using different kinds of light filters in order to create the different spectrum of light, as you can see, and to build something that could spin in certain ways in order to follow the patterns of motion that that could occur from the things that they built. On the left, those two had a challenge to try to build a cart that could pick up 10 paper clips while rolling down a ramp while going so far. The engineering piece that's embedded into FOSS has been fantastic, and kids love trying to solve the problems that are set forth for them. On the right, these students were trying to figure out how they could filter a mixture that had 4 different parts to it. And while our FOSS curriculum really did a great job of leading them towards some possibilities, it didn't spell out how to do it. There was a lot of discovery as they built a filtration system to get all of the particles separated. In these pictures, they had a task of having mystery solutions, and they were supposed to figure out the concentration of all of these different solutions by stacking them on top of each other. And then if they could solve it, they'd get everything stacked the correct way in the straw. The satisfaction of figuring it out, or almost figuring it out, or, oh, we almost got it, was very, you could tell that the kids owned it and they felt empowered by the things they were asked to do. And on the right, building things and studying it, recording things in their notebook. In most of these photos, you see kids writing things down, and if they're doing it so they can go back to it and refer back to it. This is a key part of that learning. As we moved on to life science, this was one of them. I didn't know this was going to be one of the most fun days, but when the grass actually grew, and the kids were just amazed, and it was so tall. And then after it grew, yeah, they get to cut the grass with it. It was so fun. You can see that student's picture with the grass hanging over, and then after cutting it, it sprung up again. And then also just recording the nature around us in our notebooks as they were going. There were some dissecting of natural things in the fall, trying to see the different plants, that is, I should say, that they were looking at to check out where the seeds are, using microscopes, actual scientific material equipment, and recording what they see as they're studying living systems and the different kinds of things that they would be that would be in a food chain or a food web. And always trying to, whenever possible, using the authentic materials, the shells, and it can't get much more authentic than an actual crayfish. So they use live materials at times as well, and students were studying the structures of those different creatures. Here students are dissecting owl pellets, trying to discover part of the food chain and making measurements and reconstructing skeletons as they go. A lot of pride when they figure out what those different bones are. And using our outdoor spaces. That was huge. In the beginning of the school year, we were outside for the majority of the time. Just beautiful areas that our school has. And the students really enjoy learning about nature firsthand. There's a number of things that kids can do while they're out there, as far as looking at the tiniest thing or looking at the big picture. And then one surprising thing is we didn't give any assignments over the summer, but there were some science that did continue. We did plant some plants, and while my plants don't always grow, apparently his did. Got that picture at some point in time, and I'm like, it's 3 times as tall as you. Who knew? I sent it home when it was that big. We studied the seeds. They tried to grow it. We knew what it takes to grow, and those that carried on with that apparently could grow some more.
And sharing summer highlights this spring, there has been so many kids that they want to say, Mrs. Fino, my beans, they grew. It's been such a highlight.
Well, all of those pictures I hope would kind of give you a little peek into the classroom. I wish you could be there firsthand, but those are pictures from Northfield schools as to what all students in all buildings were doing. All of this wraps around the next generation science standards that are coming our way. And we really want to emphasize that the learning through exploration and the just really fits nicely with the school's mission statement. It lets every student get the experience right there in the classroom that they can then speak about and talk about as their evidence of, what their learning is. The multimodal lessons and the authentic materials just allow every student to be part of this enriched learning. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. Kelly is going to talk a little bit more about what might be coming next for us, but thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Kelly Johnson. I'm over at the new Greenville Park Elementary School and loving our new space. And I am a Northfield graduate myself, so it's fun to be right next door to the Greenville that I attended long ago. And I love starting the year with a little book that I wrote as a 3rd grader at Greenville. I don't think we were the geckos. I think we were the gators at that time. That I just loved science when I was a youngster. And so after having taught in the district for several years, when I heard there was a position to teach science full-time to kids, I said, that's a thing. Oh man. And I got really excited to apply for it. And I'm just overjoyed to be a part of what's going on in the district. In terms of what's next, starting the school year, the second go round has been just a little more easy to know kind of how it's going to work in the time frame, getting familiar with the materials and letting the kids just explore and learn new things. It'd be really cool to continue to form partnerships with the colleges in town. It's awesome when a kid will say, well, my mom's a physicist or my dad's a chemist. And you think, oh, I would love to bring them in, or even do some sort of Zoom work with bringing folks in. So there's a lot of partnerships that can be and will be formed in the years to come. And we're looking forward to that. in terms of the community. And there's a lot of organizations that pivoted during the time of COVID and now have resources available online that didn't before. We all had Como Zoo in our classroom. And they didn't have that resource before where they're talking us through the animals and so forth. So some really cool things have come out of some trying times in the schools. And that's been real positive to see. So what I always tell my students at the end of class, we say, look up, look down, look all around, and we chant it together. And so it's so fun when we got back together here this year. I said, boys and girls, finish the sentence, look. And they all shouted outside, up. And they looked at the sky and we noticed the clouds, look down, looked at the ground around and look all around. And we talked about the changing leaves. So just know Northfield kids are awesome. It's just so cool to see the ahas and the squeals and the science t-shirts that they find with the planets. And there's always science, math, science shirts. So they're just proud and they look forward to their science day. And so do we. So thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Hope. And thank you, Kelly, Dusty, and Tanya. We may be asking you to come back, however, because board members will have questions and comments. So board members, questions or comments? Come on, go. Oh, I'm sorry, Claudia.
Hi, fantastic presentation, beautiful pictures and very touching. Just I know that the kids get so excited with that type of learning. So I'm super jealous that you get to do that every day. So each of you is at a different school site. And then do you see all the grades in every classroom every week or do they rotate every other week?
So I think it's the same for all of us. Yep. We have kindergarten and first grade twice a week for a half an hour. And then second through fifth grade once a week for an hour. So by the end of the week, we've seen every student at our school, either one time or twice.
And what about, do you get a chance to collaborate with each other and plan with each other?
Mm-hmm. Our PLCs on Wednesdays.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm. This summer, we were able to take time as well to kind of preview they call them module units, right? Like our new science units. So we teamed together this summer too. And we've kind of taken little emphasis points where we sort of become the expert on that subject area and then shared it with one another to kind of multiply our time that way. So. Other questions come? Corey.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Corey.
Thank you for all three of you, all four of you for being here tonight. I just want to call out Miss Johnson for her enthusiasm in the classroom. I have two geckos and they come home. They love Science Day. We had our little plant of grass growing for a while until we forgot to water it. And last year, my daughter was so enthusiastic about the crayfish, we had to go to the library after that and request every book in Selco. So, and when we camped this summer, we were catching crayfish up north in the lake. So thank you for the enthusiasm you bring to the classroom.
Jeff, you have a question.
Yeah, Corey took the words right out of my mouth, and the word is enthusiasm. So it's great. I mean, enthusiasm generates enthusiasm. And the fact is, I can just see you're excited about the content and teaching. So keep it up and thanks for the report.
Tom.
And I'll second what everybody else has said for the enthusiasm and everything. Is an hour enough? Never.
We would hope to partner with the classroom, as a classroom, like I mentioned, there's ways to implement science. We didn't just take it out of the classroom. The concept, right, was to give it more of a focus point, but still hoping to math time and partner with teachers. So looking for that. Still not. We want as much as we can, right?
Yeah, as we all know. And working at a college in the science department, I suggest you do reach out to us. I know the physics department would be happy to engage and share things. We have this cool thermal camera where you can see a reflection of yourself in a whiteboard. You won't see yourself, but you can see a reflection. So be happy to share some really cool things that. So, yeah. So thank you very much.
Other questions, comments? No.
Thank you. Excellent report. You have been able to instill science, I think, in a very creative and subtle way. They probably don't even know it's happening. And as an elementary, my experience, elementary in a rural school, we had a teacher who was really creative in science. And one of the projects was to watch a bean grow. Took a standard garden bean, put it in a petri dish, moist blotter paper, and watched it grow. And then by marking it, I identified where the growth occurred. And it was really fascinating, and you'll remember that experiment. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Dr. Hillman?
First, I'm just thrilled that we could hear from you tonight. Aren't these people fantastic? I mean, this is exactly what we want. And we did get 3 of our best to take these science specialist positions. They came from other jobs that were very important, and they did this work so that we could increase our instruction in science at the elementary level in some ways. I just want to share about very briefly with the board how the program change came about. It really exemplifies 3 of our strategic commitments: learner outcomes, stewardship, and equity. And it started with a response to the data. When we all looked at the data around our students' performance on the science assessments, we did not feel that we were where we wanted to be. And so, as we always do as a leadership team and working with our staff, we launched into what is the issue. And through no one's fault, when science was embedded within the regular general education elementary class, unfortunately, it was something that was not being able to be delivered in the same way in every room because there's a lot of demands on our elementary teachers. We had asked them to add social emotional learning, a core part of our curriculum that was added 3 years ago. We've increased the amount of time that we spend in reading instruction because we know reading opens the gateway to nearly everything else. The work around mathematics takes time, and kids need to go to the bathroom, and we want them to have recess, and we want them to have phy-ed several, all of these pressures on the classroom schedule. And when we talked to teachers, they said, can you please take something off of our plate for us? Can you help us? And so we ideated what were the ways that we could do that, and identifying and having a science specialist was the thing that came to the top. That's the learner outcome piece, right? We responded to the data. We responded to hearing from our staff about what the issues were that they were facing. And then we had to shift and make some tough decisions, right? Because the second part is stewardship. We didn't really add a position. We actually shifted full-time equivalent, or we shifted positions from where they had been previously assigned in certain areas so that we could free up the money to be able to have this done. So great programs like this and the things that you're seeing don't come for free, and they come at a cost, both in terms of financial and human resources. And so those difficult decisions that were made to sunset some previous positions and move that FTE into this position is an example of how, when we think we really need something, we need to change, that we first look inward. Can we find something that we're already doing that we might not want to give up, but we may have to give it up in order to get what we want? And so that core value of stewardship. And then going back to that point of that not every student was able to get science in the same way, because elementary teachers by their nature have differing levels of science background and experience. And depending upon the number of students in the classroom, all of the other pressures, we know that science instruction was not equitable across classrooms or across the, again, I want to be very clear, through no one's fault. It was a systems issue. And we fixed it, or we're working to fix it through a systems approach. And so I am very proud of these fine professionals for the work that they've done. And I also think it's an important story for the community to hear about how we got there, because it does involve our vision of preparing every student for lifelong success, and also our core commitments of learner outcomes, stewardship, and equity. And so I am incredibly proud of you, the work that you've done, even during a disrupted year. So you have my eternal gratitude. And I think that we're really setting our students. There are few places better in the state for science-focused students than Northfield High School. We have multiple advanced placement opportunities. We have a science Olympiad team, or we've had that in the past few years. And you are helping set the stage so that those students have the ability to take advantage of those world-class offerings. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Hillman. And thank you for the amazing presentation and for the work you do. You're incredible rock stars, and you have exceeded all of our expectations in terms of what you were able to do last year and what we know is ahead for this year. So thank you. And we have to acknowledge Hope Langston, who is here. We have talked several times about Portage. You have not been to the board since we were approved as an online provider. That process was incredible. And you led that with extreme, strong and determined leadership. And you had such a vision for not only getting through the rigorous application process, but also the vision for understanding it was a long-term strategy for us. So we want to thank you for that work also. So with that, thank you. Have a great year. Excellent presentation. Thank you. We'll move on now to our next item for discussion and report, and we welcome Northfield High School Principal, Dr. Joel Lear. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you very much. And if I could just take a moment before I start the actual presentation, it's hard to see myself from here. Dr. Hillman mentioned kind of the process that was put into play specific to those science positions. And Matthew, you mentioned pride. To watch the process unfold on a weekly basis at the district administrative level. To watch the process, I'm a little too tall, Noel, sorry about that. To watch that process unfold from the moment that the elementary principals show up at a meeting at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon and say, we have some things we need to work on behalf of students. And from that moment in time to make our way to a presentation like this one that just occurred, where we have living, breathing science experts just blasting enthusiasm and curriculum into those elementary kids who a year ago we were lamenting, what can we do? And I am very proud of this place for a number of reasons. I send my kids through the system, but certainly one of them is we don't sit around admiring the problems. We take a look at the problems and we say, well, what creative things could we do? And potentially at a cost, potentially with risk, and we do them. And that's the kind of thing that ends up time after time. So I just want to reiterate Dr. Hillman's pride. My pride is equally as strong in the programs that we have across the system that we do for kids. So Northfield High School, Matt mentioned, Dr. Hillman, I'm sorry. Dr. Hillman mentioned the science program that will be the beneficiary of this type of programming at the elementary level. And I would also say that one of the things I'm most proud of is watching over the 16 years I've been here, as programs are put in place in my building for improvement plans, but also across our district, that we see the benefits of at the high school when students arrive and have been through those particular adjustments. And I think of adjustments we've made to compañeros, adjustments we've made to reading, adjustments we've made to other programs at the elementary and middle school levels that end up really benefiting kids when we begin to see them then trickling up to the high school. So without further digression, I will move ahead to our 21-22 site improvement plan. And just to share a little bit about our goals and review, and that little face is a little bit of a snarky face that I have in my presentation. And really that is about our best laid plans as we moved into the year with hybrid and distance learning and full in class. Didn't allow us to necessarily do the bookends of a measurement as much as we would like to, as we have in years past. So as we look at those first two, the parent satisfaction and the college readiness, those are surveys that weren't completed. So we had the benchmark up front, the baseline data, but we're not able to complete those as part of our year improvement plan. So we don't have those results to report. I do want to, and it's interesting that I would highlight this in red on the third one, but student engagement, that 95% of our students, NHS students, and 87% who were identified for intervention at the high school would pass all of their classes during the 2021 school year. I shine that in red, not because we are proud that the numbers were significantly lower than our intended goal, but I show that for two reasons. One, that students need to be in school. The interruption and the process that took place, we did the best we could with the tools we had during the pandemic. But the truth of the matter is that our student bodies learns best when they are in person every day, all day, and with the teachers that we have hired in this district to bring that quality education. So we look at those numbers as a challenge to say, okay, how do we rebound from that? Now that we are back full-time in person, how do we rebound from that? And then also, as we look toward potential other issues that could interrupt our instructional delivery, how do we adjust and make modifications that will allow us to, and in some cases midstream, to mitigate some of those issues? And I want to share one story with you. In a case of English credits, as you know, high schoolers have to make it through a certain number of credits before they are qualifying to graduate. And we had 19 specific students that one of our teachers identified as having been unsuccessful with attaining their credit first semester of last year. And in a typical year, historically, that would be a summer school project. That would be an online project, perhaps an ALC opportunity. This particular teacher took those 17 kids and said, well, what if we midstream go get the standards that they missed from those classes that they took and reinstate those credits as the plane is flying, if you will. And in the case of those 17 students, 16 of them, while they were completing their second semester, regained and reinstituted the credit for that first semester. So instead of 17 students having a semester failing grade, one of those remained in that situation. So those are the types of stories, even though I highlight a disappointing number statistically, it is those types of things that are happening at the high school as a result of those types of numbers to say, how do we continue to evolve and change and adjust to make sure that we're providing quality opportunities, even when our environment is such that we can't continue to do what we've always done. So the rest of our goals are family engagement goal. Again, these first two were pieces that the first one, the family engagement goal, wasn't something we were able to follow up on with our follow-up survey in the spring. So our intention is to use that tool again in the 21-22 school year. And then the employee engagement goal rounding conversations will be conducted with 100% of our licensed staff and non-licensed staff by April. We put that into play again for this coming year. Rounding is having individual quality conversations with all of our staff members. And our intent is to do that with our 4-person administrative team in the coming year, and to be able to report a completed list to you at this time next year. The next 3 drop-ins and follow-up email conversations will be conducted with 100% of our teaching staff each academic quarter. What that means is that all 4 quarters last year, an administrator was in every single classroom, observing teachers instructing and providing them quality feedback about that experience that they observed. And in some cases, having an ongoing dialogue about things that occurred in those classrooms. And then our 2 anti-racism goals, or as I would refer to them as our equity goals. Curriculum and social studies was updated, and curricular resources and language arts were added to better ensure that every child feels represented in the curriculum reflects back the student experience and culture that they bring to school every day. And then our anti-racism goal number 2, staff and students will address 100% of racist behaviors, comments within 1 school day, and we will work together to stand up and support others. The piece about this that I think is kind of the bane, the frustration I have, is that many in our student body who maybe are on receiving end of comments of this type of any type of bullying or harassment behavior don't feel empowered to bring it forward to an adult. And so part of that process for us is educating our student body to say, you will be heard and you will be protected if you bring that information to us. But certainly those pieces that we are aware of are responding in that percentage. All right, some key reflections. We survived and thrived. The 3 models, although they were very difficult in each in their own individual way, taught us a lot about how we instruct and what is possible. And I would guarantee you that a number of strategies that were put in place by our teaching staff, they would have said before the year started, you've got to be kidding me. I'm going to do that. We spent the better part of the summer leading up to this last school year thinking that the hybrid model was nearly impossible. It was the worst possible option, and we would never want to do that. And then in August, we turned and said, well, that's what we're doing. So how do we make it work? And I watched some amazing things happen across our content areas to do that. And again, one of our major reflections, students want to be in school. And so we're complying with a lot of our limitations, so to speak, to make that happen. Relationships matter maybe even more than we thought. We always thought they mattered, So knowing that they matter even more, and social and emotional components of what we do make the learning possible for many of our students. And like I said, flexibility was on display every day. I don't know that there's been a year in my life where I've seen more people respond more flexibly and more creatively, and in doing so more enthusiastically than facing the obstacles that we have. So as we look toward 21-22, our learner outcomes include this goal of 70% of our students reporting that most teachers care about and are interested in me as a person. That baseline data is right at 59% for agree and strongly disagree, or strongly agree, pardon me. And then 95% of our students will agree or strongly agree with the statement that teachers at my school care about students. And the baseline for that is 88%. And again, while these are not direct grade or academic related goals, so much of the research turns that social emotional piece and that sense of belonging and that sense of connection to schools is a direct correlation to how students perform academically. So our belief is that that will play in at Northfield High School as well. Specific to academic achievement, teachers will be completing individual course mapping at course specific in course specific PLCs with consistent standards across the departments. One of the things that this will provide for us in our MTSS program is an opportunity for our credit recovery process to be much more streamlined and more efficient. So Claudia, for example, if you have 3 particular standards in a semester-long class that you struggled with or were unsuccessful with, you don't go back and retake that entire course. You go back and isolate those 3 standards and master those 3 standards, and then that credit is reinstated for you. So that process at the classroom level will help us at the credit recovery and academic response level too. And then teaching staff will develop common summative assessments as part of their PLC work. What that means, Jeff, is if you teach early American history and I teach early American history, we are using the same assessments so that we can have an intellectual dialogue about how your students are performing and mine are performing on that same assessment. And those types of conversations are going to inform how we instruct moving forward with our groups of students. Idea being that if I have a really good strategy, you should want to use it. And if you have one, I should want it. And so that's going to be one of the major goals of our PLC process. And then our equity outcomes for 21-22. This first one is a 3-year goal, and it's near and dear to my heart and to my dissertation. Enrollment of minoritized students in advanced level courses will be representative of the demographic of the students at Northfield High School. And related to discipline referrals, our quarterly referral totals for minoritized students will be representative of the demographic at Northfield High School as well. This next one's going to sound like a repeat, but it's pulled out by minority group, that 70% of our minoritized students will agree or strongly agree that most students care about and are interested in me as a person, and 95% of minoritized students will agree or strongly agree with this statement. Teachers at my school care about students. And again, same percentages from the previous slide, but broken out by demographic. We want to make sure that our demographic in those responses is equal to is commensurate with our demographic for our school. In our strategies and assessments, teachers will be immersed in activities related to our building goals throughout the year, focused primarily in our PLC time slots. The finished products of their work will be the assessment of the academic goal. I should draw to your attention too that as an administrative team, we're being much more intentional about linking the conversations, dialogue, and activities of staff meetings, department chair meetings, department level meetings, and the PLC, so that all of those are linked together under the common goal of the site improvement plan. We'll also survey students once a quarter, so that data related to student satisfaction will come at us every 9 weeks. And we'll use those results to make adjustments in how we are behaving as a team, as a staff team. And then we will analyze historic and current discipline data and also examine historically what demographic students have taken, what demographic students have taken our higher level courses, and look to incorporate strategies to authentically open access to our advanced level coursework. Now, there's a lot of words in a short amount of time. I'm sorry for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Lear. Questions, comments board members have? Amy.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm always love hearing what the high school's doing, and I definitely support all your equity goals. I have a question about the educational access goal. I think it's a great goal, but I worry at the same time that it could cause a situation where students may not be put in the position where they could succeed if you're worried about numbers. And I'm wondering if that's not how it's not a straight numbers thing, it's more making sure the students are prepared and ready to access those courses.
Yeah, there are about 40 pages of response that I have for you, but I'm going to jump back to a conversation Dr. Hillman and I had about a year ago where we talked about a strategy or initiative some schools have used where they have just simply reached a quota and they've said, we are going to put X number of students from each demographic into these courses. So on paper, they accomplished our goal in a matter of moments. The truth of the matter is that all of the research, and I mean all of the research, points to that's not how it's successful for those students. Because you're right, what we have done is we have created a system, whether it be advanced placement or any other advanced or honors program, with the assumption that students come into those classes already equipped to be successful, as opposed to being very intentional about broadening the demographic and the access, and then giving them the tools in that course to make them successful. So it's really about a shift in your philosophical focus about what those students come to that class with, or how prepared those students come, because we have historically in this country said, you take an advanced coursework class because you already have the tools to be successful. And our take there is, if we are going to really move the needle on equaling our school demographic in our advanced coursework, we need to be able to provide them the tools leading into it, but then also fill those gaps if there are gaps once they are into those courses.
You're doing it on both ends. You're making them more prepared, getting there, and once they're there, you're also giving extra support to make sure that they can succeed.
Exactly.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
And then I have one more question that's sort of related. I like your idea of 100% of racist comments will be addressed within 24 hours or whatever. I know that, a lot of racist comments are obviously racist comments, but then there are some that are sort of gray area comments. And how do you handle those where maybe someone sees a comment as racist, but another person did not see it as racist? So
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Amy. And here's what I will say, that while we are an institution that works to help students achieve appropriate behavior, we're also a learning institution. And so those two things can cross at times. That there may be students who are using expressions that are microaggressions, and they're just simply not aware. So part of that process, when we talk about responding to or addressing them, part of that is engaging students in a teachable moment to say, do you realize when you say what you said, how that makes you sound, how that makes other people feel? It can be a situation where they're just not aware of the impact of that. I used expressions as a kid growing up in central North Dakota that came flashing back to my memory as an adult and just like shook me to the ground. And I was, oh, but at the time I had no idea what the context was, what the meaning was. And so part of that process, of that response we have, is really helping educate students to say, this is the impact, this is the meaning that those expressions have, and in some cases, the historical context of what makes those terms what they are. So most of what we are talking about in terms of a discipline response is about unkind behavior toward another person. So if we're talking about things where there's a misunderstanding, we're going to work in those situations to help make it a teachable moment.
great. Thank you very much.
Great questions. Thank you, Amy. Other questions, comments? Tom?
You talked about learning that relationships matter more. What did you learn?
You're finishing the question. I think and I will come back to that the image of the percentage of students who were unsuccessful in a class or more over the course of the year. And what we saw was students who were disconnected, and in not all cases. Some kids flourished in the independent environment. So I want to be very clear about that. But what we saw time and time again were students that were disconnected from the relational environment, were immediately disconnected from the academic environment. So they left the school building, they went off individually, and that was it in terms of their academic experience, because they were so closely tied together. I think what we also saw, and some of the people that spoke earlier talked about isolation and talked about mental wellness and mental well-being. that we saw a lot of students responding adversely to the situation they were placed in as a result of the pandemic that we didn't see when they were with us every day, all day. And so I think we learned, obviously staff, we learned a lot about ourselves about how we can manipulate what we do as professionals instructionally, but we also saw a lot of, I think we've always thought and felt those social, emotional, relational connections were important in the school day. I just don't think we were aware just how intensely important they are.
Other questions, comments? Claudia?
I just wanted to make a comment about how much I appreciate what you've built there at the high school. My kids have personally benefited. We benefit from what you're building there in terms of addressing the relationship, addressing their emotional health. Even before we moved to Northfield, I had a friend who was already here and she was telling me how much the high school work to meet students' academic needs as well as their social emotional needs. So just grateful for your presentation today and everything that you're doing there to connect with our students.
Thank you, Claudia. Appreciate that.
Excellent, thank you. Other questions or comments? I do want to echo Claudia's comments as well. I mean, it is really, it was really heartening to see that that's where your priorities are this year. And I think they're very well placed in terms of the social emotional needs of our students coming back from, coming out of the year. Everyone is coming back to school in different places. And for you to recognize that and say, no, this is a priority for us, I think is really excellent. I see that flex hour is starting.
It is.
Is that going to be similar to, well, it's been what, 2 years, right? Before that, since that was really in its full process of how that works. So is there some changes coming to flex hour? Is it more or less how it was? And then I know within flex hour is the CCR, career college and readiness curriculum, and how is that being weaved in, and are there any significant changes there?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So as you may be aware, the Teacher Association votes every 2 years on approving the flex period in the CCR. And so when we finish that first 2-year term, leading into so it would have been a year ago fall, we really set aside kind of 4 intentional modifications to what we were looking at. So if you remember, we have four goals and objectives of the flex period. One was to deliver CCR. One was to kind of relax the rat race of the school day. One was to give students an opportunity for some academic support, and really felt that, and I apologize, I'm blanking on the fourth. It'll come to me in a moment, but I'll highlight really what the emphasis of that was, that as we looked at those first 2 years, I think there was a little bit of a concern. Well, I know there was some concern about making sure that students understand kind of all of the aspects of those goals and objectives, and recognizing, yes, it's an opportunity for you to kind of shake the sillies out, maybe get a little exercise, get some homework done. But we wanted to make sure that they understood that the purpose of that, that we have to prioritize things like, academic supports. And so students who were struggling, that to make sure that we're emphasizing those 4 goals and objectives. We still advertise the flex period as being all things for all kids, but within the confines, obviously, of the structure that says these are the 4 reasons that this program came about. And in order for it to flourish, we need to recognize those. So what we have done at the beginning of the year here, and tomorrow's day 4, is that we ran 4 CCRs in a row. So starting last Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday. And what we did was the teachers are delivering kind of a mini lesson, if you will, about each of those 4 goals and objectives. So 1 each day. So students are hearing kind of an expanded rationale and explanation of why the flex period exists, but then also to kind of recommit to those priorities. So that if the student recognizes that and highlighting where they can get academic support and in what content areas, what opportunities are available during flex period, and also to re-engage that piece of mental health and mental wellness. Because when we talk about reducing the rat race, that doesn't really sound like a mental wellness initiative necessarily, or just an emotional wellness initiative. So really channeling an opportunity to talk about the resources and services we have available for kids. So I would say those 4 days are really the biggest change for us, because it was an exploration when we first started, but I think we learned a lot about how students respond in that environment. overwhelmingly positive from students and staff, but we wanted to make sure we tweaked those things so that it was really as effective and appropriate a time period as possible, given that we were taking a little bit of instructional time to make that work.
Excellent, thank you. I'm sure the students are really thrilled to have Flex
Yeah,
Hour
yeah.
back. So I think that unless there's other further questions for Dr. Lear, we just really have to thank you for your leadership, your strength of leadership in the building that is really responding to very, very difficult challenges, but with such positivity and flexibility and the willingness to do what they need to do to ensure our students are successful. It's just really phenomenal work, and we thank you.
Thank you.
We wish you a very good year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lear. So next we welcome Greg Gelano, our Northfield Middle School principal. Welcome, Greg.
Good evening. Hopefully go in a moment. There we go. And that's it. We're done.
Here comes Tim to help.
Again. Oh.
I'm just going to take this opportunity to remind those present that your face mask must be fully covering your nose and mouth for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Just on the fly. Yep, I will do that. So, again, like Joel, this is, I was saying, this is the first time, because we were on Zoom last year, that I get to be in front of all of you in person in our new beautiful boardroom. So thank you for allowing me this time to go through middle school site improvement plan. And they're set up here in a moment, but I will just kind of jump in, and we're kind of talk a little bit first. We're going to start with some priorities that we had last year and what we really focused on. Here we go. So, Jim, you can go to the next one. Perfect. So we really focused in on health and safety. We set up really efficient systems for contact tracing. And as you go through the list, I don't need to read them for all of you, but as you go through them, you can see it really, we didn't really talk about academics much in these focus. Our outcomes, of course, we wanted our students to learn. But it was a pandemic. And with the middle school students, we knew that coming into this last year, that if we didn't build on relationships, if we didn't focus on meeting kids where they're at and really taking the time to slow down, that it could be disastrous. So that was our focus going into it. I will point out the last bullet point I have there, the prioritizing principles, relationships first, as I mentioned. The second one has a cool story to it. Equitable access. So early on, if you would have told me prior to pandemic, okay, if I'm going to plop a pandemic into the school year, what students are going to struggle? Of course, you're going to have some that surprised you. We did. Of course, you're going to have some that were more successful than we thought. We did. But the large chunk of them were not a surprise. There's students that have struggled for years that we really have tried to support along the way. And those are the students that we had to think outside the box. So if you think about the hybrid where you had half the kids coming in 2 days and the other half the other day, the other 2 days, I really advocated for, we need to find a way, similar to the high school at a summer program, we have to get this group of students to come in every day somehow. So we set up a system where they didn't cross, again, in the priority with health and safety. And we had some cool things happen. Our torch staff connected with them, and lo and behold, with the extra time, the students loved coming. They wanted to be there. The students that sometimes struggled to get to school. As a matter of fact, there was one student that we had huge attendance issues with. Matter of fact, we had a discussion where we wanted to even, I hate to say waste a spot or give a spot to pride time to the student. Should we put someone else in there? We can't even get this person to come to school, wake up and get out of bed. But we put them on. That student walked her other 2 days for pride time because she was so excited to get there. That relationship piece was so key. And those students, did they get A's and B's? No. But they got caught up in a lot of work. And they enjoyed coming to school. And their grades did go up somewhat. And to me, that was a huge win. Because again, these are students that we have tried before the pandemic, everything we could think of to get them to be successful. And for that brief moment of those extra 2 days, they were around peers, they supported each other, they tutored each other. They felt successful and they liked being there. And that was a huge takeaway. And many of us, when we set this up, we were really adamant about doing it, but that was beyond what we expected. And so when we go through this, where academics really a priority, kind of, but in a roundabout way. So the equitable access to me was a big aha moment for many of us, and it's a big success story. But we also showed grace to our students and our families and staff, because you have to recognize that when you're going through pandemic, there's different experiences for everyone. And that's something I told our staff this year to start, is when we start the year, you have to assume that everyone coming through your door, whether it be an adult, could be a colleague, or your students, experience the pandemic differently. There are some with extreme cases. There are also some that it was an inconvenience, but they didn't have the same story or the same experience, same journey through this. And that's, you have to keep that in mind when you're teaching. You have to keep that in mind when you speak to people. So you meet them where they're at. All right, Tim. All right, reviewing last year's goals. Now, after all that spiel, this is kind of one of those cases that I would have loved to know where I was sitting when I even thought about doing this goal going into the pandemic. It was a bad idea, but that's okay. It was what it was. Hope is my witness. So as I did some digging, we wanted to improve our failure rate as we went through moving forward, because it bugs me. Kids shouldn't fail. And so that was the goal I set up. And as you can see, we went backwards. And the failure rates that we're talking about, these are students that received at least one F during the course of a year. So, Hope, like I said, could be my witness. I was pretty down for a few weeks. Saw this, gee, what in the world happened? I really would have beaten myself up. Man, there's good things happening. I've been in classrooms, I walked through, I know kids are learning, but why did this happen? And we could have a discussion on what an F really means and why you're giving an F. That would be for another day. But then a few weeks after this came out and they created this, I get an email from Hope saying, hey, I'm going to be at the middle school in the morning. I got some good news for you. Great, do some. So she did. Kim, next one, please. So the state came out comparing districts. This gives perspective. So yes, the previous slide was not good. I'm still upset about it. But it does give perspective, because as you look on here and how you read this is grade 6 reading, 92% of the schools in the state performed lower than it. So we are in the top 8% across the state. And as you go down, those are really high. So our students are learning. That part I got right. I knew our students were learning. I knew the material was being delivered in such a way that they had to learn. They were excited about learning. But like I said, topic for another day on why the Fs happened, but the perspective is our kids are learning. I apologize for the slide on the right. The formatting got goofed up. The reason I have that on there is those are low percentages. That's percentage of student that took the MCA, and this is all based on MCA. Or numbers of students that also tested were down. For the students that opted out during a pandemic, I know for a fact that there was several of our students, because a lot of that came through me. So I know there's some students that would have performed very well, but their families just didn't want to, and I totally respect that decision, not taking them. Okay, Tim. Our climate goal, some really good news. So we had a climate goal of wanting to have at least have our families attend 2 conferences at a rate of 75%. So 75% of our families attend 2 conferences throughout the year. Well, the family conferences, similar to what we did this year, we have that 99% is actually low, is 99 point something. It was less than 10 families out of the entire middle school that did not go to a family that very first family conference last year. This year, if you're wondering, it's close to 80. We haven't totaled it completely up, but that's the ballpark range. Will be right around 8%, which would, even at 80% would be higher than my previous 23 years at the middle school any conference rate. High percentage of our families that are coming in right at the beginning of the year. But then in the spring, we still had 76% of our families come in. For a spring conference, that is off the charts. I'm typically lucky to get 60% in the spring. So very happy with that percentage. So we did meet that goal. I don't have that goal moving forward, but we'll always, even though it's not on the slide presentation, it's still a goal. We want our families to come in and meet with our staff, get questions answered, tell us about their. Now, the second one is interesting. Originally, I feel strongly as I really want to focus, and we will, is focused on as kids go from 5th to 6th, 6th to 7th, their transition years, and how that moves along. Given the state of the pandemic, I made an executive decision, so forgive me. I changed it, and we did a different survey. And since we went from distance learning, hybrid to distance learning, I wanted to know, okay, given the spring before, how did we improve? Because we'd made some serious adjustments. Our schedule, if you remember, was completely turned upside down on how we did things at the middle. And how did students manage going from that hybrid to distance learning? As you can see, about a third of our families responded, fairly equal between the 3 grades, and 71% of them answered that their students did well with the transition or very well. I'm kind of an 80% guy. I would have been happier with 80%, but 71 is pretty good. So we did some things right. So students they knew what was going on. The number of questions that came in were very few. Families were informed. They appreciated the communication because they've told us that. So in the end, I think this goal went very well. All right, Tim. So what did we learn? Similar to Dr. Lear, relationships need to continue to be a priority. Similar to that Pride Time story, we need to take the time to know our students. We need to take the time to meet them where they're at, and we need to take the time to know what they need. And that's hard to do when you have a big building, you have a lot of kids, so you have to put some things in place to do. More is not always better. We really focused on the core instruction. Staff looked at PLCs and they looked at and said, okay, it's different. There's no way I'm going to hit all the standards. What are the absolute must-have? And they dug in. They made some tough decisions. But I'll tell you, I had some really kind of aha conversations with a lot of our middle school staff, because not only did they dig in, but they said, gee, I can do this differently and still meet some of these. Or I've been doing this for years. I've always wanted to try this. So maybe I won't do this time, and I'm going to do something else. So it really gave them an opportunity to really look at what they teach and how they teach. And they were thankful for that. They said this was an outcome they didn't see coming. It was a lot of work, but they felt that it's something, and they all, without exception, said they're moving a lot of that forward. Pandemic or not, years to come here moving forward, they're going to keep some of that. I could jump to the bottom of continuous improvement, but students want to be in school and consistency goes a long way. Students, you could tell last year, they were kind of like the analogy deer in headlights. They walked around, they were happy to be there, but the friends weren't there. They knew it was different. They're middle schoolers. Developmentally, they are where they're at, and they just didn't totally understand. They got there was something out there, a pandemic out there, that we had to do this, but they wanted their friends back. So as you came into this year, I will tell you, masks or no masks, you can definitely tell they're excited to be. They're excited to be, their staff is excited to have full classrooms again. Many of them told me that. And you can tell that the students are excited to have full hallways. It's a good thing. Consistency goes a long way. That's something the district made a priority with Schoology, and that did go a long way. Our grade level 6th, 7th, and 8th really collaborated together because they really took this to heart and they did some things in their classes to keep things consistent. And families, as I told our staff at the beginning of the year, as I went through this presentation with them, the number of phone calls or emails I received from families saying how frustrated they were with Schoology and Skyward, and they didn't know how to make sense of this or where they go for what, went to just about 0. And that's thanks to them. A lot of hard work on their part. They made it a priority, and it benefits kids. And again, the continuous improvement never ends. It seems like that's an obvious statement, but it's one of those things that you knew it was true, but you could really tell it was true. We had to keep moving forward. And that's the biggest thing for this year. Keep going forward. All right, Tim. So going into this year, I could at this point kind of end my presentation because Dr. Lear and we went together and collaborated on our goals. So these are going to look very similar. Okay, the percentages were changed. But again, we want to prioritize as a district and as a secondary school, we want to prioritize those connections, those relationships. And again, as Dr. Lear said, we feel that if we do this, academics will come along. This is a piece that it's a key ingredient that we have to have as part of learning for our students. And by doing that, we feel that the academic piece, the grade piece, that'll take care of itself. So as we look through here with the student survey, again, I don't need to read the numbers for you. We're just going to prioritize that. We want students to not only feel like they're seen and their voice matters, but that we care. And that's going to be a priority. All right, Tim. Equity goals. The high school and us are a little bit different just because of obviously 2 different buildings. But we are going to look at our courses as well. And we don't have the variety or the number of enrichment courses at the middle school, but we do have some. We have levels of math that we can look at. And our leadership ones are the ones that I'm really interested in looking at. So looking at our web leaders, what does that look like demographically? How about student council? What does that look like demographically? Anything we do where we're looking for students to take a leadership role or be in classes, let's take a look. And this year, you'll see in the strategies, we're going to spend this year kind of doing a historical analysis of where we've been the past few years, and then figure out a plan on where we want to go. Discipline referrals falls in there, same thing. Okay, let's really look at the data. You don't get a ton of office referrals, but the ones we do, is there a pattern? If there's not, awesome, we'll celebrate that. If there is, why is it? And what do we need to do different? Next, please, Tim. Student satisfaction. This again was similar to the academic one. It's just the percentages changed. The one thing that I will point out as you look at the baseline data, the baseline for the first one, that students of color report that they agree or strongly agree with the statement, most teachers care about and are interested in me as a person. We're going to increase that by 20%, but the baseline was On the survey, only 20%. But if you go down the baseline that teachers at my school care about students, it's 70%. Now, what that tells me is they naturally know that teachers care about students or educators, not just teachers, but all people in the school, they care about kids. That's why you get the 70%. Yep, wish it was higher, but that's considerably more. But when you personalize it, internalize it, and say, yeah, but what about you? Now that number goes down. And that's, again, what I really stress to our staff is that you're not doing anything wrong. Clearly, they know that you care, but they need to know you care about them. So what can you do differently to make sure that that student or students knows that when you're when you're teaching, when you're talking in the hallway, you're not just talking in general, you're not just talking to everyone else, you're speaking to them. And that needs to be the focus, because that will flip that. And I did pretty high percentages because I think we can flip it. All right, Tim. Strategies, how are we going to get there? The district, we continue to prioritize receiving professional development once a month. That's a big deal. And with our equity, and now we're Avid. Amen, hallelujah, we get to start Avid finally. So after delaying that, we get to start our professional development for Avid. And that's going to be a big deal. That will be a game changer. We're going to survey our students once a quarter. So we can look at the data. How are we doing on those questions? How are we doing? We have to adjust. Are we making progress? Or are we not? And then administratively, as I mentioned, we're going to kind of dissect how we're doing as a middle school. Different areas, whether it's the courses themselves or if it's our leadership group. Okay, Tim. I personally will be keeping goals in front of our staff. I do a weekly update to our staff, and at least every other week, I will send some type of information that's specific to our goals to keep them thinking about it. I don't want to be a one and done. It's great. I heard about it in August, and now I don't have to worry about it anymore. We want to keep it in front of them. We will continue to look at MCAs, but only for that perspective view. And then we're implementing STAR instead of MAP. I don't claim to be an expert on STAR. I will hopefully get there being a data guy, but STAR to me is going to can be a game changer. And I know just from the little training that we had in August with our staff that there's many of them that thought, wow, this is going to be huge. And so I'm very excited to be implementing a tool that we can use and to help us adjust and improve along the way. Okay, Tim. All right. Again, that's what we have for our presentation this year, and I'll field any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gelano. I'm assuming our slide beautiful pictures was from your Rocky Mountain vacation this summer?
It was. Yep. I
Excellent.
told my wife it's where we go because we have to go
Excellent.
someplace every year so I can use the pictures.
Well, because last year you had Estes Park as your Zoom background.
We did. And actually that was also still in Rocky Mountain because of the pandemic, we delayed a whole family trip with my kids are older. We took all the adult family now to go hiking.
Well, they're beautiful pictures and we're glad that you had the opportunity to really go off the grid for a while because it was you came off a very challenging year. So that was a bonus to see those gorgeous pictures. So board members, questions or comments for Mr. Gelano? Claudia.
Thanks for your presentation, Greg. It's always great to hear from you, and I just appreciate what you do at the middle school. I had a couple of questions. You spoke about Pride Time at the beginning of the presentation, and I'm not familiar with that. You were saying, were you saying a student was allowed to be on campus 4 days?
Correct.
Okay,
So
and then
we
what is
did
Pride Time?
A little bit go back. Our schedule, if you remember, our electives, including our musics, all stayed virtual. So we could focus more on core instruction, the reading, the math. What that did is it freed up space. So what we did is we brought those students in. They had a separate bus. So they did not, because they came at a separate time. They came a little bit later than other students. So when they showed up, they came through the door and we set up their classroom, so to speak, in the band room, big space, and that they spent their day there. They could do Schoology, communicating with their teachers. Our torch staff was there to support them and help them doing a tutoring. They tutored each other, to be honest with you, and kind of got after each other about, what do you mean you don't have that done? So there was some of that going on. But that's how we kept them separate. And then they did leave earlier too. So we were able to keep the two cohorts separate, but yet give them that little extra scoop of help.
So they kind of did their distance learning on campus.
Correct. They did.
And it was
So most of the students that we brought in did not take a lot of electives. That wasn't their thing. They had a few, but they were apt. So if they had a fax class, the torch staff each student had a big, huge chart of, okay, at this time you have fax. So then they kind of got separated. They had their earbuds on. They could do their fax. They could still zoom in with their class. We tried manipulating a little bit for some of them to get their electives in prior to even coming in. They kind of squeezed at least one of them in before they got the pride time. But yes, we still allowed them to take care of that. But then it's that downtime because it's only probably was a couple hours of their day max that they had that. And then it freed them up for the rest of the day then to work on other.
Oh, neat. That's really creative. And so what is Pride Time?
Yep, that's just what we call
Oh,
it.
that's just
We
what you called it.
we just
Okay.
call it Pride Time. That's what we call it for those
Okay.
kids. to come.
Oh, excellent. Okay,
We
thank
fed
you.
them, they got their lunch, they got breakfast when they showed up. It was a really kind of a cool program.
Terrific.
Greg,
Thank you.
people might not be familiar with the acronym that's part of your school-wide behavior intervention system, why you called it. So why don't you talk about that,
Yep,
please?
and PRIDE is an acronym. So PRIDE stands for being prepared, showing respect, having integrity, being dependable, and showing your excellence. So that's what we preach to our students. It's a PBIS program that we started, I don't know how many years ago, but quite a few years ago now. It's been successful. It's still alive and well today. Students, we focus on students doing the right thing, and they can win prizes. They can put their name in for drawings, and they get these gold Pride tickets that they can put in for drawings for just doing good things, doing things that you would expect students to do. And so by focusing on the good, the outliers tend to kind of merge in to kind of conform or do what other people are doing, type of thing. So that's where the acronym came from, or why Pride Time, why we.
Other questions, comments? Amy?
Thank you, Principal Delano, for your report. And my question is about the Zoom conference calls, because it seems like that was a format that worked for a lot of people where coming in might not have been as good a format for them. So are you considering at all keeping the option of a Zoom conference call for families who need it? And also, in a related question, if there's any sort of language barrier, how do you handle that during conferences?
Absolutely. Terrific question. So we did actually keep that as an option, even with family conferences last week. We kept that to families, if they reached out to their teacher that they were conferencing with and said, hey, I'm not comfortable, I'd like to do a Zoom. I did have even a couple parents that said, you know what, I prefer not to wear a mask, but I want to come in person. The teacher said, hey, let's meet outside. So they did that. So we were very accommodating to families. The language piece, we get in front of it and we work with our EL teachers and Sebastian to really find out, okay, who really is going to need interpreting. And we kind of are proactive and we really reach out to those families, and whether it's Spanish or another language, Somali, and then we set up interpreters. So we have interpreters that are available that go to conferences with those families that come in, and anyone that does a Zoom, we have the interpreters just join in on a Zoom call to bridge that language gap to make sure that that's not an issue.
So was the Zoom option actively promoted, or was it just sort of a secondary thing if people said, I can't really make it?
I promoted in the sense that my communications to family was that we prefer you come in person, but if you're more comfortable or you just can't do it because of your schedule, just reach out and we're more than happy to do so.
Okay.
I can tell you that most families,
And then I also had a thought for you. Are you still doing the student of the month?
we're not doing student of the month, but we do, Mr. O'Keefe, when he does his morning announcements, will do fun things with students where um, they can win prizes and stuff, whether it be pride or just to get them involved and get them excited about that. And then again, like I said, we're focusing more on the pride, what students are doing right to allow them. And what we've done in the past, we couldn't last year with the pandemic. Like at the end of the year, we do some little ice cream parties and things of that nature for students with great attendance. We do things of that nature. Torch does pizza parties for their kids if they make the A or B honor. So there's things like that that are still happening, but we don't actually do this.
My suggestion, which you're probably already doing, was just to make sure whenever you recognize students, to also make sure you're recognizing your students of color on an equal basis. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do know we're going to be having students in the newspaper.
Yeah, the Northfield News reached out to us and they are bringing back a student of the week program actually. And so we have a rotation where each of our programs, including our Portage program, will be offering a student of the week. And so it'll be published in the paper and then on our social media pages as well.
Very fun. Other questions, comments? Tom?
I envy your trip. It looked, looks like there was even snow in the mountains.
Oh yeah, there's always still snow. We went right at the end of June.
Oh.
We always run into snow.
Well, except this year, there's maybe not, always can't be said anymore.
Right, true.
I was curious about the less is more. What did that translate into for this year? What will that look like going forward?
Well, if you think of the standards, especially there's certain subject areas that have a wide variety of standards that teachers are trying to hit. That wasn't going to be a possibility last year, just with the less time of students in front of them. So the less is more. What we mean by that is instead of really trying to get to everything, but focus in on the less of the standards, but okay, what is the key? Make sure they have that solid foundation, knowing that moving forward, the other teachers may have to pick that up a little bit, but if the student has that solid foundation, it'll be a whole lot easier to do. I use the example I've used with some other staff is actually my youngest daughter, who could have went in an enriched math class, chose not to. So there's a lot of concepts she didn't get moving forward, but she had this super solid foundation and excelled with math when she got to college to get a math degree. And it's all because, and her professors had told her that, is that you had such a strong foundation that it was so much easier to teach these other concepts. And so that's what I mean by less is more, making sure that all of our students or every student has that key foundation that will allow them to branch and really learn those higher level academics at a later date.
So it helped you identify what those core things were.
Correct.
Great questions. Thank you. Other board members' questions? Greg, I had a question. You talked about it in your narrative and then you just highlighted it briefly. If you could give us just a quick refresher on AVID, what that program is and how many staff you have trained in that and what the exciting plans are for that this school year.
Yep. So we are very excited about AVID. So we've trained, the pandemic kind of threw a wrench in their plans because a lot of the training that had to go by via Zoom, remote, and it's good, but it's a whole lot better when you're in person to be able to collaborate with colleagues from other schools. But it is what it is. So we have a little over 20, I think 23 staff members have gone through a summer worth of training. We have now branched off of that. So that's considered our site team. So it's a bigger, if you picture a larger circle. Within that site team, there is 5 teachers that are now the leadership team. What that leadership team has done in the district, I have to thank Dr. Hillman and Hope and stuff for allowing us to prioritize that during PLCs, is we are going to focus at once a month having AVID training. So that site team, that smaller team of teachers is going to have our staff and train them in strategies, teaching strategies that are AVID based. It's called WIC. And so they're gonna take a concept and they're gonna lead it. And with the expectation, they're gonna give examples, they'll introduce it. And then the expectation of staff is to go out and they're gonna practice it. So, and then they come back and we're gonna share out. And that'll be kind of the pattern we use the entire year to get everyone on board. The goal then is, well, it's more than a goal, it's gonna happen, is that we will have a group of this year's sixth graders as they go into seventh grade be our first AVID cohort. And what AVID does is it focuses on students, those learning strategies that we want the whole school to have, but it's really designed for students, minority students, but all students. Students that really didn't see themselves necessarily going to a college or going on beyond high school. And it shows them they can do it. Now there's a catch to that. AVID is not for, it is for students that fit into those categories, like I said, but they have the skills to do it. It just, they never envision themselves to go there. And so the trick is, as you talk to other schools, is finding the right students to make that fit, because it's a commitment and it's hard to do. And that small group of students, to start with small, will have what's called an AVID elective. And there, they may take college visits. They will get tutoring that gets done through there. They'll talk about careers, organization. So there's different aspects that those students will get that will be really pretty intense. The hope is then, after next year's seventh grade, they go to eighth grade and you have an AVID elective in eighth grade, you have a new group of seventh grade, and you kind of build from there. The high school I know, is interested then, and I'm hoping to get them on board now, start thinking in the future, so to hopefully then have a program going to high school, grade and 10th grade and so forth. They do also have an elementary program that Angie Shook, one of our sixth grade teachers, it was a part of that and knows more about that. So at some point, I'll have a conversation with our colleagues in elementary and see if they're interested as well, kind of partner.
Okay, that's really excellent. Thank you. And if you just want to tell everyone what the acronym AVID stands for.
And, oh, now you're gonna put me on the spot. So let's see if I can get it. It's
I looked it up. If
you did.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
I just wasn't sure if I was correct, but it's advancement via individual determination. Okay, good. Yeah, it's a really great program and I'm glad you
It is.
highlighted it. So just wanted to be sure that we had a quick refresher on it. So thank you. So thank you so much for your work. And I just really appreciated your insight into how the pandemic has affected everyone. And I think that your approach and how you're moving forward and just getting a glimpse into hearing how the school year is starting out and really your strength of leadership. And one of your greatest strengths has always been your excellent communication with families. So thank you for that. And the work that was done with Skyward and Schoology is just really outstanding. So just so many really good things happening and really being creative. And Pride Team is just really encapsulates the way you look at how can we, ensure all students are successful. So thank you for what was a really challenging year last year and lots of success in what we know is coming forth in this school year. It's just going to be amazing. So thank you.
We're excited.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Sorry. So those are our presentations per se. We can move on now to Dr. Hillman. We have policy committee recommendations.
Yes, the policy committee reviewed a number of policies recently. Some just had very minor changes in terms of some statutory pieces that we just updated. You've empowered the policy committee to make non-substantive changes. And we denote that on the policy when we publish it to the website. So if it's just, you got to reference this statute instead of this one because there was a legislative change, we do that. You've empowered us to do that. So we have a handful of other policies that have gone already to the website that your policy committee did approve. We have two this evening that were just different enough, and frankly, they're not a ton different from the one before, but they did meet the criteria for us to bring them to you. The first is policy 524.2, which governs the use of technology and telecommunication systems by students. And this policy, just want to point out, you've got the strike through underline in your packet. I do want to point out, we just had some formatting pieces in terms of trying to make the lists a little bit more user-friendly for people to be able to read more easily. And then probably the largest, it's the only real major change, is just talking about this policy was developed when people mostly used computer lab computers, right? So it was about you can't install your own software on computers in a lab. And of course, we've moved totally the other way now. People are really using a lot of mobile devices. And one piece that we just had to make clear in this policy is that people are not allowed, which I think we all understand, but you got to put it in the policy, that you're not allowed to illegally copy or install district licensed software on personal devices. So if we have a license for a piece of software that we've paid for, you're not able to gain access to our system and put that in your personal device. Now, I think most of us think, oh, of course, but we need to make sure that we put that as one of the items in our policy. So that's the major change with 524.2. Again, pretty minimal, but that did change it gave another rule that people need to follow, and we feel that you needed to approve that. Again, pretty minor compared to a lot of other policy pieces. Very similar with 616. So this is the school district system accountability policy. And this really drives most of our world's best workforce reporting. So of course, the world's best workforce is a state law that focuses on some specific benchmarks that they want all schools in the state to be able to achieve. And one of the key vehicles that they use in that is ensuring that there's a community advisory committee providing the school district the feedback. And so if you'll look at what we did, is we just did some mostly minor modifications. However, we did define what the advisory committee is here in Northfield, and we call that Northfield Forward. And I'll just read the statement. Northfield Forward includes a variety of district stakeholders, meets 4 times a year. Northfield Forward is positioned as the district's quote unquote critical friend and provides feedback on the strategic plan, world's best workforce report, building goals and results, and professional learning communities goals and results. So this is just to make it abundantly clear in the policy to the state, what is our advisory committee that we're required to have by law. So first reading of these two policies, not anything terribly substantial, but enough to where we felt you needed to make approval of those items.
Okay, thank you. Do board members have any questions on the two policies, 524.2 and 616? Yes, Claudia.
Not a question, just a comment on page 1 and page 2, where it says the district provides students with access to computers and peripherals, district networks, internet. I'm wondering if it should clarify internet on campus.
Tell me where that's at again.
Section 2, general statement of policy.
Oh, got
And
it.
it lists internet, and I'm wondering if it should say the district will provide internet on campus or a hotspot or.
Yep, that's
see
a
what I'm
good
saying?
question. We're going to take that as a note because, as you know, when this policy was written, everyone assumed that that internet was only on campus. But since we've had things like the Emergency Connectivity Fund, and since during the pandemic, we have been able to provide some families with internet access, we should clarify that. And I think putting both of those would be reasonable. So Anita, if you can take that note, we'll make that adjustment before the next reading.
And then the other comment I had is on page 2. Hold on, let me find it. Where it speaks, letter C, and then the last sentence, non-district owned equipment may non-district owned equipment may access district guest networks, but must comply with the school district policy and procedures.
Yeah, so what that means, Claudia, is we have 2 networks that are within our school system. So we have a password protected network that it's the ISD 659 network, and that gains more access to things inside the system. We have a guest network that a lot of people in this room are probably using the guest network here tonight, and you're able to use the guest network without a password if you so choose. But what we are just saying is that we want people to be able to access the internet through the school, through the guest network. What we're just simply saying there is that you still need to comply with the school district policies and procedures. So by way of example, the content filtering on, we are not able to drill that down as neatly as we are when you're on our ISD 659 network. So because we have to enforce the Children's Internet Protection Act, there may be less access, for example, if you're using our guest network versus the password protected network, that all of our student devices, they don't have to plug that past, they're already hard coded to be able to join that network, but only district devices are allowed to join that network. People's personal devices are allowed to join the guest network. It may just not have the same level of access.
And you could only access that guest network while you're on campus anyway.
That is correct.
Okay.
Sometimes, and outside the signal does reach outside of the buildings. You can get it in some parking lots, things like that, but it's generally on campus. You're right.
Okay, thank you.
Great questions. Thank you, Claudia. Any other questions or comments? Okay, these two policies then will be items for individual action at our September 27th board meeting. So we can move on to superintendent operations and COVID update, Dr. Hillman. And as a reminder, in the table 5 were the updated COVID numbers from Rice County.
Yes, and so to start my report, I just want to stop and say thanks to board members for your engagement with our school improvement plans. I believe, Anita, that was the last school improvement plan this evening. Mr. Gelano, you usually bat lead off. You batted cleanup here today. And so as you see, we take continuous improvement very seriously, and the school improvement plans are an important part of setting the vision for the school year, what we hope to accomplish during the school year. And we try to show you some stories. We try to share with you data that talks about how we are moving toward that goal. I also want to point out that we are realists. And you saw over the last few meetings that people shared when they didn't meet their goal. And that is really the spirit of our continuous improvement approach. We do not get bent out of shape one way or the other on the data. We accept the data for what it is. And so when we have a win, so Greg celebrated a win of seeing that, okay, yeah, we had some other tough data, but when we compare ourselves to other schools in Minnesota, we know we are in the top quartile for sure in almost every area. And so sure, you celebrate that, right? Okay, we did fairly well compared to the rest of the state. But he was also very honest about, we did not meet the goals that we had in this area. And here's what we're going to do next. There's not whining. There's not complaining. There is, what do we do to improve this result? Because we think it's that important to put it in our school improvement plan. And so I think you see a variety of different goals that all align with the strategic plan, right? That's the genius of the strategic plan, is you have a vision of what you want the school district to be. You have those strategic outcomes. You saw people make explicit connections to those 5 core strategic commitments that we have to the community. And so I'm very pleased with our principals and our building administrators' processes for bringing these school improvement plans forward. And they just continue moving forward, which I'm really proud of, regardless of the distractions or the curveballs or whatever it is that we've been thrown at us. They continue to move forward with those plans and those goals. And you'll see in this year of recovery, a lot of focus on what can we do to make those personal connections. And I think it's important that we know that a quote that we often reference is that no great learning happens without great relationship. And so that focus of having kids, around 600 kids participated in Portage last year, right? We heard a speaker tonight talk about how they've been welcomed back into the classroom. There was this extra effort to try to make that happen. And so we often also say we want to go slow to go fast. And so you'll see some things that are about the human condition of schooling that are so important to achieve our longer term goals, because goals are not just 1 year at a time, right? There are things that span over multiple years. So I'm really proud of the school improvement plans that were brought forward this year. Hope Langston, our instructional services coordinator, did a lot of help in making sure you're noticing that they're tighter and more aligned than they ever have been before, because we are a system. We are not a system of independent contractors. We are one system with one vision, and we are working to get there. So I'm really proud of the alignment that we're seeing. We still have more room to go. There's still continuous improvement to do, but we've made a lot of progress. So I was inspired to share that. It's not in the report, but I took the liberty to share that. So thanks, Greg, and all the other folks who did some great work. And thank you, Hope, for your leadership in that area as well. So let's talk a little bit about where we are. We've said we'll give you an update on where we are in the pandemic at each board meeting. So tonight I have a few topics for you. The first 2 are specifically related to COVID-19. And the first is just talking through the county report. If you looked at the report that I gave you in the original one in the packet, We waited as long as we could to publish the packet, and the numbers from the week of August 19th to September 4th were just not published yet with Rice County. So I was pretty hopeful between August 15th and August 22nd. We saw, you go back, you look at that chart, you go back to the beginning of July, the middle of July, we saw weekly case rates under 10. We're like, this is great. We're getting in the right direction. Then we saw it hit 25. Then we saw it jump to 79 on July 25th through the 31st. It stayed stable. Maybe we saw the peak, right? That would have been great. Then we saw it jump to 108 the next week. It went up just a little bit and then it went down. And we look back at these previous surges and we try to look at and say, all right, a lot of times you saw a 6 to 8 week increase, then you saw it level off and you started to see it come down. And so we were hopeful that 99 in the week of August 22nd through the 28th was the beginning of the descent in that curve or in that surge. Unfortunately, last week we saw that rebound to 140 cases through the county. We do get the disaggregated every Friday. They'll give me the disaggregated data. And Northfield it's been typically about the percent of, if you take the percentage of Rice County people that live in Northfield, we have tended over the last 18 months to be pretty close to that. There'll be times where we're higher than what our percentage would reflect, other times where we're lower. So we're continuing to look at that because what we've pledged to you is to look at metrics both at the county level. We have to recognize we have over 275 students who come here from Faribault alone. So that is, a pretty significant portion of our community. So we can't just look at the Northfield and Dundas numbers, which are our primary proxy, but we're going to continue to have those numbers disaggregated. So we are hopeful. We're continuing to listen to the public health experts, and there are some folks in Minnesota saying, right, maybe we are at the top of this particular surge, and I'm hopeful we are, but we'll continue to watch that data. So we're going to continue to look at that. I do want to share, in our SIP plans, people talked all about all of the different variations that they planned for a year ago, right? You heard Principal Dr. Lear talk about planning for hybrid, and you heard Greg Gelano talking about how do we get these kids on these other days with hybrid. We had all sorts of other things because we didn't know anything. We knew nothing, right? And so we were planning for all of these potential options. And last year, during the same reporting period of last week, we talked about 31 cases in Rice County. And this week, similar timeframe was 140. So I think we have come a long way in how we are trying to approach this in as safe of an environment as practicable. So I just think it's important for the comparison. Last year, with 109 less cases during a similar reporting period, we had all sorts of things that we were preparing for because we are using that old approach. If you can prepare for everything that you can think of, maybe you've actually by default prepared for some of the things you couldn't think of, which both turned out to be true and false last year. But I think it's just important for us to take stock in how much, even though there are more cases, how much different of a place where we are and where we do have the confidence that we can have kids here every day and we can do it as safely as practicable. It's not that it's going to be completely safe. Can't be completely safe, right? No matter what. But we're trying to use the methods that we've learned to be able to keep people here every day, despite it being a different public health situation right now compared to last year when we knew far less. And we'll continue to learn more. I want to share a little bit about the reporting. So we reactivated the district COVID-19 dashboard. And as you know, we were pretty upfront. We weren't the complete leaders in this area, but we've pledged to try to be as transparent as we can without invading people's personal health data with reporting what the condition is like in the district. So we're back to report. We basically update that every day. And so we have spreadsheets where we get the laboratory positive cases. We publish the total number of current cases. If it's less than 5 in a building, we just use the thing less than 5 because we don't want people to be able to figure out, oh, that's the person who was sick. We want to try to do the best we can to provide some privacy to folks who are going through the illness. But we do update those current cases nearly every day unless there's nothing to report. And those cases stay on the dashboard in their building for a period of 14 days. So just this afternoon at Spring Creek, I took a case off and we're back down to 0 current cases at Spring Creek. So we're literally updating that every day. Sometimes, hopefully not. Last year, we were updating it multiple times a day. Let's hope that we're not updating it like that. We also share the total cumulative cases. Again, the same thing. If it's less than 5, we just put less than 5, and then we'll give the actual number once it's above 5. We are also going to continue to calculate the weekly influenza-like illness rate. So this is something that our nurses have looked at for quite some time. We kept a very close track of it last year because this is a piece where both the influenza-like illness rate, which would include COVID kinds of symptoms, this tells us what percentage of students are home because of those influenza-like illness symptoms. And we really want to pay close attention to that. The State Department really in fact, they, even before the pandemic, you may remember several years ago, there was an influenza outbreak in a southwestern Minnesota metro community, and they actually had to shut down that elementary school for a short period of time because the influenza-like illness rate over a period of a week had been above 5%. So that's a long-standing MDH piece. And again, that 5% is something that we're looking at. Thankfully, we aren't anywhere close to that in some of the first few days reporting. The first schools I saw come in today were less than 1%. That shows that's great. We're very happy with that because that is, it's still a reactive, but it's more of a real-time. How is this impacting our families at that school level? Now we calculate that once a week and we calculate the average of the averages, and it's a Friday through Thursday reporting, because we've been trying to update that on Fridays so families know at the end of the week what's going on in their school, but we have to have a reporting period shutdown time. And so we do a Friday to Thursday update. That's what we did last year, and that's what we're doing this year. We're doing something similar with the student quarantine rate. If you are quarantined because you were exposed, you're quarantined because you had symptoms, that would include students are home quarantined, actually isolated, but we're combining those two terms for this particular statistic. If you are staying home for those reasons, that's going to be the daily quarantine rate. And again, we're calculating that over the period of a week. That should be far less this year than what it was last year because of the safety measures and the increasing rate of vaccination that we have within the system. Because again, what we have is that if a person is vaccinated and they were a close contact, they do not need to quarantine unless they develop symptoms. And the same piece, if both parties in an incident were wearing a face mask and one of them tests positive, as long as people in that case were wearing a face mask, those students who are would have been considered close contacts don't need to quarantine. So we are very hopeful that that will be dramatically less than what it was last year. So those are the two pieces of update that I'm just giving you about the COVID situation today. The latest case rate that we're seeing at the county, we're only a couple of days into school, so I don't have those other weekly reports for you yet, but we'll start to publish those, and I'll share those with you during these meetings moving forward. Want to share a little bit about family conferences, and I did include in the packet the slide deck that all of our teachers pre-K through 12 used. Every single teacher used the same slide deck. Now, they did adjust it based upon the age of the students. There were some additional slides in some buildings, but you got to see we're trying to, again, have that system across the entire district. So I also included that it was really a bright spot, that uplifting energy that we had in ours. You could feel people were happy to have their kids back, and it was joyful in so many ways. Here are the questions, the things we asked families. How was your family's school experience last year? That's pretty important to know. How was your experience last year? So we can try to make sure that we're helping you this year to the best of our ability. What's your student looking forward to this year? Do you have any concerns about starting the year? What kind of concerns? If we know the concerns up front, we can try to help. We can try to adjust and support families. Is there any information you want me to know right away? These things are really important because when parents tell us things that we need to know, we can better support their students. And so it could be that they got a new cat, right? That's a big thing for kids, all right? That's great. It also could be that they could have had a loved one die, or they could have had a very serious family health situation. When we are armed with that information, we are able to make that experience for kids just that much better because we care about them first as a human being. And then we also talked about what questions did they have about the start of the school year. We gave an introduction to the new communication system that we piloted in the end of last year and starting this year called Talking Points. You've heard about Talking Points a few times at this table. In an upcoming meeting, we're gonna have a presentation to you about Talking Points itself. Just as a reminder, this is the system that allows our teachers through an app to be able to text message back and forth with families without using their own personal cell phone number, which I think we can all agree is probably a good thing, right? It also captures all those messages, so we're complying with being able to retain that information, and it does real-time translation. So when we send a message to a family who speaks a language other than English, they receive that message in their home language, Now, if you've ever used Google Translate, right, there's a lot of jokes on the internet about how sometimes inefficient something like Google Translate is. If the message comes through and it doesn't make sense, the family can just tap a little question mark, and then a live person within 15 minutes will take a look at that text and they will try to help clarify it. So a live interpreter, somebody who knows that language, is able to help us with that. And so we're very excited about it. We did an introduction so people could get starting with it. And I actually already have a report showing the top 10 people. I've got a person with I think it's 50 messages they had already sent, to their families. And that was a combination of individual and group message. So you can target one person. You can say, I need to tell this parent this, or you can target a group of people in your class. We're pretty excited about this because we're serious about communication. And this is going to allow us to personalize communication. Our pilot last year showed that we were able to connect with families who we could never get in touch with before because of that text messaging system. So it's a really big deal and we're very excited about it. And so we'll give you a presentation on that coming up. We did an introduction to Skyward and Skylert, just making sure everybody knows what they need to do and how they can get in so they can get those all important snow day notifications, right? That hopefully we don't have any snow days again. That would be a gift. We also were required by the federal government this year to do a technology access questionnaire. It was something that's required by the feds because I think they're trying to get some information around how they can support areas where there is less technology access in the home. So we did that. And then we also have a new technology support system this year. It's called Incident IQ. And rather than families having just to email or make a phone call, they can actually use the same ticketing system that our staff use. And so there was an introduction to Incident IQ. So that was really what was about at family conferences. We're still trying to calculate what percentage of people. What we always know is that the elementaries, it's almost always near 100%. I'm really happy to hear Greg say we had another year of really high percentage access at the middle school. And then we just know for years we've reported to the community that we still have difficulty getting high school families to come in for those conferences. We continue to work. We don't give up. We just keep trying to work at it in different ways. So we have a lot of feedback, especially from our staff about our pre-service schedule. We're going through that as an administrative team this Thursday. We're going to be creating something for our staff called a 3-2-1 report. We look at all the data. We say, here are 3 things that went very well. Here are 2 things that you told us we need to improve and do something different with. Here's 1 action that the leadership team is going to take to address those concerns that you shared. And so we're going to be working through not just family conferences, but the entire, what we call pre-service workshop schedule. So that was family conferences. Staffing update. What I wanted to share is just, there's been a lot of national reports about staffing shortages in schools. And I just heard this morning, St. Paul Public School is much bigger district, than us, but they were, their bus contract was short 100 bus routes, right? They're having to do some things differently there. We're hearing about shortages in a number of areas. We're no exception. What I understand is our partners at Benjamin Bus are able to run their routes as normal. They have not, what I understand, had a staffing issue on our regular transportation. Where we've been struggling is in our educational assistant position. So in many school districts, they call this a paraprofessional position. So a person, needs either some college or they can take an assessment to be qualified. And they really work a lot with special education students, but we're short about a dozen of those people. I know when we're interviewing for them because people are really excited that we have candidates, right? So I want to just assure board members, even with a shortage, we still run our regular process. We still make sure that we are conducting those background checks that are really important. We're still focusing on trying to provide that initial training. But I'll tell you, this is an area where we really, so if anybody knows of people who want a job, it's a pretty good paying job for the qualifications that are required. Our benefits have routinely been lauded as something that are excellent. So if people know of people who would like to make a difference for kids, we'd love to have them. So they can check our website. We have been down a few child nutrition staff, not too many. 3 was the last count. I know they were interviewing today for a position. So that's a good piece. And then substitutes in all areas. We have substitutes. We do have substitutes. We just don't have the same number of substitutes that we have had in the past. There's a lot of theories around that, right? Number one is that people who used to substitute have been getting hired in lots of districts for full-time positions, right? If there are new full-time positions available and I was subbing, I might be able to get that job. And so I'm looking at that. Also, quite a few of our substitutes, this is a generalization, may have been concerned about being in an environment like a school in terms of with everybody coming back. Everybody's at a different level of what they're comfortable with for public engagement. as we are hopefully exiting the pandemic very soon, but there are some people who are still, so we think that that may have some of it to do. We continually look at our pay each year. We know that our pay is generally competitive, but at the same time, we know that it isn't just schools, right? You talk to nearly any industry, you are struggling to get people to work. We could talk about trucking, we could talk about ordering from various companies, and we just know that there's a lot of employee shortages across all industries, and education is no exception. And then finally, I did want to share that, we did have on the first day of school, we did have the Lieutenant Governor, the Commissioner of Education, Dr. Heather Mueller. We had Deputy Commissioner Dr. Stephanie Barrage, local Representative Todd Lippert also joined. They greeted students as they came off the bus at Greenville Park. And then they did also greet students at breakfast for a few minutes at the beginning of the day. So as you saw, Lieutenant Governor, the Governor, the Commissioner of Education, Deputy Commissioner Barrage, were throughout the state it used to be everybody started on the same day, right? So if you saw something like that, it was one school that got it. Well, I think they did it for 2 or 3, you had some schools that start on August 15th because they're an early start. And so you basically from August 15th, and you still have some schools that are just starting even tomorrow. I know there's a few schools that are still starting this week. So we did have those folks here to help welcome people back, welcoming them off the bus, and then just for a short time at breakfast as well. So that is the report here this evening.
Excellent. Thank you. Questions, comments board members have?
I have one question.
Yeah, Claudia.
Can you confirm that the languages spoken in our district are supported by the Talking Points app?
Yes, because Hope remind me how many languages they have. Yeah, 100 different languages. So the languages that we are serving, we were struggling because we have a small Vietnamese population, for example. We had been really struggling to be able to get appropriately translated materials for that group. We have some other, what I would call singleton languages, where we might have 1 or 2 families, who speak that. So it's difficult in some cases to be able to get people who know the language well enough to translate. We've had to have people for some languages come from all over the state to be able to help us with that. We do the best that we can, but this is a way that we can intervene and try to do the best that we can to make those connections with those families.
Amy.
I too am excited about the Talking Points app, and I'm just wondering, can families choose more than one phone number for text to be sent to? Because I know often parents serve different functions and are available at different times, and it's nice to be able to inform more than one parent.
I'm looking to Hope Langston. Come to the podium, please. I'm guessing it's yes. I mean, that's what my assumption is.
Yes, multiple phone numbers can be added. I'm going to be totally honest. We're still working out some of the kinks with that, with the way Skyward interacts with Talking Points, because Skyward actually feeds the Talking Points phone number list. But that's something we continue to work on with Chris Nesset and Kim Brisky. And so we do know that yes, multiple phone numbers can be added per family.
And I encourage you to keep working on that, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of families interested in having more than one phone number.
Yes, and the other interesting thing is the Talking Points does track the opt-out rate, so it's an opt-out system, and we are still at less than 1% of our families opting out.
And is there a limit on the number of texts that can be sent, or are we charged by text, or how does that work?
No limit. If you all get a digit added to your phone numbers, I'm going to blame Talking Points, because they create a phone number for every teacher that's using it. And so there's not a limit that we have hit. And we just, I think that's something we're going to explore, is how much is too much information. But right now we are having success reaching families that we had not successfully reached before in our other methods of communication.
And can families initiate contact, or can they only respond?
Nope,
They can
initiate. Yeah.
It's pretty, so here's the report I got at 11, it says 11:50 something on Friday, 11:27 a.m. on Friday. Carrie Duba from our instructional services department pulled. So this is at the second day of school, right? We had it running for what, a week?
Mhm.
There were 8,210 messages already sent by that time. So that's an average of what, 2 per kid in the district or something like that. But my point is that's also the reporting I think is important. So we're able to see how are we getting the return on the investment from the tool.
Thank you both.
Well, that's going to be an exciting presentation. So I'm glad that's coming up because we did hear through all the site improvement plans that administrators and staff were using it. So that's awesome. Other questions or comments? Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, Matt, just to clarify more on COVID policies moving forward and just to recap and talking to you before, was it even August 1st that, I mean, the numbers look good. I mean, we're probably moving into a non-mask and maybe to start the school year. And then 2 meetings ago, we had the vote, made the decision on the 7 board members, 1 absent. And out of the 6 that were here, 1 voted to start the school year without masks and the rest masks. So we're in that, we're starting the school year with masks on. So it's part of that is the ramp on and ramp off thing. I mean, ramp on when, what's the data to show that we're putting on masks? What's the ramp off to show that we're taking masks off? And just, out of my decade plus being on the board, a lot of times, when you look at school districts, we always call it the Golden Crescent, which is kind of like Edina.
The Fertile
Why is that
Crescent, yes. on the
Yeah,
west
and,
side,
and,
yeah,
and the,
we've
the
got-
point of them, there's cutting edge and there's bleeding edge, and those are big districts, kind of what they're doing to get a little bit of a look. And I also like comparison wise, in the Big 9, never call your conference a number because it's 12 teams in the Big 9. So, I mean, and part of that, I mean, it's geographics about this, but I mean, what other districts do we compare ourselves with too? And it's been all over the map. And I think that I would just like for clarification that you can tell the folks here, what do you need to see for, the ramp on and the ramp off moving forward. And I would like to, I mean, I know you're not going to make decisions on it immediately, but I would like to see more clarification in that and just kind of as far as guideposts to what people can look forward to.
Yeah, happy to share that. So I've shared many times before that the 3 metrics we're really looking at, we're going to be looking at the infection rate, right? So we're talking about the infection rate both in the county and in the community level, as I mentioned during my presentation. We typically use the zip codes of Northfield and Dundas. You got to use the county a little bit because we have such strong open enrollment for Faribault, but we try to put that into context, right? So we're going to look at those rates to the best of our ability. We're going to look at that influenza-like illness rate. So there's a difference between infection and illness, right? So we're going to be looking also at the illness rate. And then finally, we're going to continue to look at the student vaccination rate as something that we're going to look at. Now, we have not been able to update that file in 3 or 4 weeks. So we're working, it's a complicated file to update. And we've been using some other proxies, but we anticipate we'll be updating that file in the next week or so here to get what the latest vaccination rate is. So those are 3 things. Now, I am a data person, right? So I know everybody wants what's the end zone, right? If there's anything that we've learned during this pandemic that I am still a little bit reticent to give a number, right? And here's why. How many times have we been doing this where we've been given a number and then it's changed? Just irritates people, right? And so wanting to be transparent to say, I don't have a number yet. We don't have a number yet. Now, we are working with our incident command team, and we have a local epidemiologist who has joined our incident command team. And we are looking at how can we establish some ranges that would say, these are the ranges that would prompt us to look at some relaxation of our safety measures in these specific circumstances. And so right now we have a universal masking approach. We have said from the beginning, we will continue to look at the data. I am going to be the challenge. Anybody in this room, I think I'm going to be the happiest person when we don't have to track this data anymore. There might be a few people who are happier, but I know that I will be very thrilled when we don't have to do that. So Jeff, it's a combination of those 3. And it would be disingenuous right now for me to say this is the goal line because we have been fooled before on this. What I'll tell you is other districts are taking wildly different approaches. So you have some districts who are using it, and I think this is a fairly good approach that we should consider, looking at the 4 stages. I can't remember the name. It's the stages of concern from the CDC. So is the county in substantial transmission? Are they in high transmission or uber high? There's 4 levels. The top 2 are bad. That's what I know, right? And so they are talking about when they hit one of those top levels, then they implement their protocol, right? And then they have masking it either that level or through the whole system for until that number drops into one of the lower two quartiles, right? Which I think is moderate and low. And the number of days is wildly different. So you have some districts who say, we'll look at it every Friday and then we'll change it for Monday, right? So it could be 5 days. You've got others who have said, we're going to wait for 2 full incubation periods. So we're looking at 28 days in that particular case. So you have that very wild range, right, of things. You've had some people who have said, we're going to have it in effect until this particular date, and then we're going to make another decision. We've said we're going to continue to look at it regularly, and we're going to make the decision when we think it's appropriate. I do think it's fair for us to have ranges. There's no question about that. But at the same time, we needed to launch the school year, and we needed to do it. Well, you heard our school improvement plans. We launched the school year very well. The first few days of school have been awesome. It has been wonderful to see full buildings again. It has been a true joy to see kids in school. It's awesome. Now we're going to come back and we're going to start looking at those pieces and trying to be able to establish what's a reasonable range. That's the off ramp. Now the question is, if you take the off ramp, if you end up taking the off ramp, what's what is the place where you use to get back on? That's where where I have not seen a lot of places yet have determined because the ramp off probably needs to be longer than the ramp back on. Because by the time if you are waiting for the data, it's all lagging data. By the time you're waiting for it, it's already there. And the goal is to keep the thing out to the best. We will not keep it out. We haven't kept it out, right? There's no piece about that. We're not going to be able to keep, we're going to do our best that we can to be able to keep it out of the system. So I understand, I absolutely understand. And I would prefer to say, yep, here's the number. I just have learned, unfortunately, it is not that simple. And we are going to work on what those ranges look like and what are those combinations. I understand the frustration. I share the frustration. But at the same time, what we try to do to the best of our ability as a leadership team and as a school district is when we commit to something, we do everything that we can to follow through on that to the best of our ability. There are times you've made a promise that you can't keep. You have to be honest about it, right? You say, okay, we couldn't do that. But I think our record shows that that's been fairly few and far between. So I'm giving you the best answer I've got, Jeff, today, and we're going to continue looking at it. We want to be judicious. We want to be smart about it. We want to remove those protocols as soon as it is safe enough to do so. But we also do not want to give up. We have a very clear, you've heard us say it many times, because we have a very clear vision. It's not difficult, right? We want to prioritize uninterrupted in-person learning. You heard all of our principals talk about how critical that is, right? Our vision is there. We've been very clear about the vision. We haven't wavered from that vision. And that's what we'll keep doing. We've made some reasonable exceptions where we think that we can't either enforce something or where we think obviously there's a reasonable exception for it. But that's where we're at today, Jeff. And I understand that people want a number. I just don't have it yet. And I don't want to tell people something that I don't think we can follow through on yet.
Yeah, thank you. You and I have talked about this in length, so I just wanted you to share kind of what your thoughts were. So thank you.
My pleasure, Jeff.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for the
No problem.
incredible work you're doing. So let's move on to the approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a few personnel items in the table file that were added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on now for items for individual action. We have two this evening. The first is a employee action regarding probationary teacher contracts. So is there a motion to approve the employment action regarding a probationary teacher contract as presented? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Tom. This is a roll call vote. Anita?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Our second item is a motion to approve to take action on an employee grievance. I'd like to move to table the motion regarding an employee grievance. There's a second by Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on now to items for information. Exciting open house. Dr. Hillman.
A long time coming. So in 2018, in November of 2018, the community with over 60% of the vote approved a $40.975 million bond referendum that built a new Greenvale Park Elementary School. It did renovations and additions at Bridgewater Elementary and at Spring Creek Elementary. It renovated this facility, the former Longfellow building, into the district office and area learning center. And it really had what I would say is a cutting edge approach to renovating the former Greenvale Park building into the Northfield Community Education Center, which is going to provide, I think, a world-class early learning experience for a lot more kids than we could do before. So we've got these wonderful facility updates that no one could see last year. And so way back in June, we set September 23rd as a day where we are going to host some building tours. And so we're going to follow through on that. We're going to host these building tours. They're September 23rd from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. They'll be at all of the sites where we had any kind of renovation or construction. So at Spring Creek, Bridgewater, ALC and district office, and the NCEC, the Northfield Community Education Center, and at the new Greenvale Park Elementary. Now, there's varying levels, right, of renovation at these sites. So for example, Bridgewater Elementary only has basically that secure front entrance and some small renovations in the former office area. So that's going to be a couple of people there. We're going to have some self-guided tours there, ranging to where we'll have tours available for people at Greenvale Park. Face coverings will be required for things that are indoors. We are having a special ribbon cutting and ceremony at Greenvale Park. We're going to do that outdoors, so we do not have to wear face coverings. That's of course weather dependent. The plan is to move it into the gymnasium if we need to do so. We have a handful of speakers. There's going to be some pretty cool handouts at each site to show people what they did. And I want to point out that, not only did we complete those projects mostly on time in the middle of a pandemic, right? The Greenvale Park Elementary opened when it was supposed to. And what was it? 40% of the build season was after the beginning of COVID-19. So pretty awesome what we have. We can't wait for people to see these spaces. They're wonderful. And we were able to bond and complete the projects for less than what we told the community. So when we were out telling the community, this is what we think it's going to cost you for your taxes, we know that people's taxes went up less than that because we were able to bond for less for a number of reasons, a good bid day, but also the district's bond rating. There are only 3 school districts in the state who have a better bond rating than we do. And that allowed us to get an excellent interest rate. So we were actually even able to do some upgrades, still come in at that budget, but we were able to do it for bonding for less. And I think that's an important part for the community to remember. Val, did I get that all right? All right, very good.
Excellent.
So open houses 4 to 7, September 23rd. It's been on our website. We have put it on our Facebook page and our other social media outlets. Parents got an invitation this past week. Anita is working on getting an invitation that's going out to 12 or 15 community. It already went to community groups. So things like, Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce and all of our strategic partners in the community, we want them to join us as well. So we believe that we can do this as safely as practicable with face coverings and again, smaller groups of people moving through the building. So we are excited to welcome people for them to see these facilities.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Does anyone have a specific question? Okay, about open house. I believe you're going to possibly have board members stationed.
Yes.
And we'll get something from.
So
Anita
that's
about
something,
that.
board members, what we'd like to know is if you can contact Anita and let us know the couple of places, right? The 2 or 3 places that you would be interested in being at. We also have board members, Dr. Hardy and Dr. Iverson, who are no longer on the board. We're on the board for the bulk of the projects. We have invited them. We'd invite you to be at one of the buildings if you so choose to just interact with the community and talk with them. So if you can give us a couple of the places that I know everybody wants to be at the new building, right? But we can only we got to spread you out. So if you can give us what your top choices would be, and then Anita and Julie and I will assign, you'll have assigned locations if you're able to make it.
And I think we talked about that everyone could culminate at Greenvale at 6:30.
Correct. Yes. Yep. You bet.
No one would have to miss that.
Yeah. And we'll have some building level folks at each building, obviously. And then We'll also have a representative at each building from our construction firm, Knudsen, and or our architectural firm, Wold. And so we'll have at least one representative from one of those two companies at each of the sites. In some cases, we'll have two there.
Excellent, thank you. And Anita, thank you for reaching out to the various community organizations that may not always have access to our school district communications, so that's great. So that is all we have for the meeting tonight. Thank you, everyone, it was a long evening, but it was really, really good work, great questions, amazing presentations, and we appreciate the audience members being here. We do appreciate you observing us do our important work for students. So thank you for being here. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Tom. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.